All right, so just let me know, Austin, when you have everything.
Okay, we're good.
We're good to go. Okay, give me just 1 second. Oh, well, I didn't have my agenda open, but we're good here. Okay, I want to welcome everyone to Alpine City Planning Commission. And we're going to get started with, actually, I think we'll do a roll call here in just a minute and see if we have a couple other people hop in, but we'll start with Jeff Davis giving us an opening prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance. Since Ethan isn't here, John, will you lead us in Pledge of Allegiance? All right, thank you.
Heavenly Father, we bow our heads and give you thanks for all that has given us, for the beautiful town we live in, and for all the blessings which we enjoy in this country. We ask that watch over this meeting and help us to be kind and understanding, and help us to understand each other. And we also pray for our town and our leaders. And we say this in the name of Jesus Christ.
Amen.
Sarah, do you want me to pledge allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I love having the chance to participate in the Pledge of Allegiance. We don't get to do that all that often in our lives. So with us tonight on Planning Commission, we have Troy Slade and John McKay and Alan McDonald and Jeff Davis and myself, Jane Greiner. And from the city, we have with us Austin Roy, who is the city planner. And is Jed on the Zoom call?
I am.
Okay, and we have Jed Bush, the city engineer. And we also have with us Steve Doxey, one of our city attorneys with us tonight. So appreciate you coming, being with us. So I wanted to just really quickly go over meeting etiquette since we have a full agenda, all public hearings tonight. So there was this out front. If you haven't signed, it's great to have you sign in as you come so that we know, who's in attendance at our meetings. But just remember, in public meetings, commentary is limited to public hearings. And what you will want to do when you speak is come up to the microphone here, and you need to state your name and your address. The meeting's being recorded, and so we want to make sure it's clear and the person doing the transcription can hear all the comments easily. We also, if you'll just know, please be respectful to others, refrain from disruptions during the meeting. Conversations in the audience actually make background noise, and it's really difficult to hear on the recording. So please refrain from private conversations in the audience, and make sure you keep your comments constructive, not disruptive. No verbal or noise like booing or applauding are not appropriate in public hearings. Please silence your cell phones, beepers, pagers, other things like that, unless you're, a first responder or something where it's required. And also, we want to be considerate of others who wish to speak. We'll limit comments. Typically, they're limited to 3 minutes. And we can shorten that if needed, depending on how many people want to comment. But also, we'd like to point out that if you have something to say and someone else has said the exact same thing, that it's not necessary for you to comment. It's not that we need to have 5 people say the same thing for us to take it seriously. We will listen to every single comment. And so please come forward and share any Public hearings are especially for gathering information that we may not already have, hearing the public's opinion. And so, if your exact thoughts have been shared, then hopefully you will feel comfortable not needing to, come forward and share those. Sometimes if there's a large group of people who want their voice represented, they'll appoint one person to just kind of speak for their group. So that's another way to help with that. So anyway, also, if you do choose to leave during the meeting at any time, which you're welcome to do, if you want to talk, just don't stand outside the doors and talk, because again, it just makes it really difficult to hear. We do have to leave the door open at all times because it's a public meeting. And so I just wanted to point those things out before I started. So we will go ahead and move on to the public comment portion of the meeting, which is that if anyone has a comment on any item that they would like us to hear that is not on the agenda. So if the item that you want to make a comment on is not on the agenda, then you can come forward now at this time and do that. And that's always at the beginning of all planning commission meetings and all city council meetings. So does anyone have something that they would like to bring forward? Okay, well, we will move on then to our action items. And action item A is the public hearing on Lambert Park Conservation Easement. It's one of another of many meetings that have been held on this and a continuation of the process. We have the city attorney who we were hoping, Steve, that you'll be prepared to introduce this item and give a bit of a summary before we start the public hearing.
I'd be happy to. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
This conservation easement has been discussed in concept for many months. At one point, the grantee Utah Open Lands, or the proposed grantee of the easement, proposed a draft, and we took the opportunity to modify that draft so that we could meet the expectations of the city council and the residents of Alpine City. So what you have before you, or what we have presented, and the subject of this public hearing, is an actual draft of the easement document. It's fairly lengthy, but it contains a number of provisions. So let me just outline sort of briefly how the easement document works. There has to be a conveyance. If the city decides to enter into a conservation easement for Lambert Park, they need to convey an interest in the park, a conservation interest in the park, to a third party. Otherwise, if the city just says, well, we don't ever want development in Lambert Park, that decision can be overturned at any time by the city council. And so the impetus for this was some sentiment that we want this to be the way it is for years to come into the future. So in order to do that, there is a third party involved. That third party doesn't succeed to any kind of ownership of the park. The park would remain in the ownership of the city. The city would have the responsibility to maintain it. The city would have the responsibility and right to manage it, as long as the management is consistent with the easement itself. So the easement's broken out into a conveyance of an interest to preserve and protect conservation values that are set out in the easement document itself. Those are pretty broad, pretty general, but those are the basis of the conservation easement. And so what the city does is, by making this conveyance, it gives to the third party, Utah Open Lands, the right to, and also the responsibility to defend Lambert Park against encroachments into the park, such as development, such as subdivision, such as private use of the park instead of public use. And so, so you have the conveyance aspect of it. Then you have certain prohibited uses. And those are enumerated in the document. There aren't a lot, but there are some that are important. And I think it's important to note that, you know, among the prohibited uses, you have subdivision of the park property. You have inclusion of the park as open space in a residential, commercial, or industrial development. Construction of residential, commercial, or industrial structures. Use of motorized vehicles except as otherwise specifically permitted in the document. Then the document has certain permitted uses. Those uses include any existing use of the park. So if the city is satisfied with the existing uses of the park, this easement is not going to make any difference. It's not going to make any changes. It's just going to say, we want to continue and preserve the park for the existing uses. Any non-residential or non-commercial use consistent with the conservation values is a permitted use. By definition, a permitted use, we don't have to get permission from anybody to do it. We could just do it as a city. Construction and maintenance of public park facilities, including pavilions, picnic tables, public gathering areas, maintenance of existing utilities, events or special uses, subject to a permit from the city. So if the city wants to have a special event at the Bowery or at the rodeo grounds, that's a permitted use. We don't need to get permission from anybody, but anybody who wanted to hold such an event would have to obviously get a permit from the city. Maintenance and use of existing roads in the park, consistent with their historical use. So really what this does is says, if anything is a historical use of the park, then that's permitted. No permission necessary. And so the easement really in that sense doesn't change anything other than it allocates to a third party the responsibility to defend this park against a use that is not what the city wants and that does not conserve the park as it is currently. Clearly, there are a number of uses that can't be anticipated. And so what we've tried to do in modifying this easement document that was proposed by Utah Open Lands is to give the city maximum flexibility for future uses as the property owner, the right to use it as long as it's consistent with those conservation values.
Looks like I have my mic off. Could you answer one thing, which is the advantages of a third party being involved?
Sure. So City Council has deliberated about this a number of times, and you know, why can't we just have, for example, a deed restriction? Or why can't we just say as a city, as the city already has, I mean, if for anything that has to do with Lambert Park, there's a supermajority requirement of the City Council, and you have to go to the Planning Commission to get a recommendation. Those are options, but and I'm not here to take a position either way, just so that you know, I will do whatever the city leaders tell me to do, but the one disadvantage of those is that the next city council can undo whatever you've done. By way of even the supermajority requirement, the city council with a simple majority could undo the supermajority requirement. So it's a hurdle, but it's not an insurmountable hurdle for somebody who wanted to develop the park. If you turn it over to a third party, then we basically locked it up under contract so that those uses that the city doesn't want to do currently and doesn't ever want the park to be subject to, such as commercial or industrial or residential development, if that's the case, those uses would be prohibited and safeguarded by having a third party as the recipient, basically the grantee of the easement.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I think before we have any discussion or questions from the council, unless you think it would help clarify anything before the public hearing, I think we'll go into the public hearing. Are you guys okay with that? Okay.
Well, you did already somewhat begin the Q&A.
A Q&A
but,
process. I just,
you know,
that was
you want
one
to-
question I did want to make sure that we answered before. So if you have any burning questions that you would like to make sure everyone hears before
They can
we
wait.
start, they can wait. Okay. All right. So we'll go ahead and open the public hearing, and please come forward. As I mentioned before, state your name and your address. And we will need to, can you run the timer for us tonight? Thank you. Okay. So.
Hello, my name is Robert McFadden. I'm currently building or about to build at 1315 Box Elder Trail. I stood up in the city council meeting last time when I first heard about this the day before and was told about what was about to transpire. And I honestly couldn't believe it. I stepped up here and said, I'm in favor of conservation easements. In fact, as a developer, I'm doing a conservation easement in Camas Valley for 130 acres. So I understand the value of a conservation easement. I also understand that the one that's proposing the conservation easement, never in a million years would I ever lock up a piece of property in perpetuity. If anything, things change. And if the fear is from this council that some future council might disagree with you, well, guess what? There might be reasons to disagree with the decision in the future because we don't know what is going to happen in 10 years or in 20 years. And to tie us up in perpetuity, and in fact, in your document that I read, which now that I have read it, would never support it, it says 7 times, forever. So it is well beyond just tying it up, as the attorney stated, for many years to come. It is tying it up in perpetuity. And if you know anything, things change. Nothing is ever the same. And so it sounds like all of the things that we're trying to avoid is development. In all the lists, there was some form of just developing in one way or another. So if the fear is to not develop this piece of property, let's take some time and let's commit 6 months or a year to understanding the impacts of what this decision is going to mean to this community, the community that I plan on living in for the next 50 years. Let's understand it and do it right, because beyond the easement itself, the bigger issue is the fact that we are locking everybody that lives in Box Elder and Lambert communities into, in perpetuity, as those lots continue to develop and those homes continue to build, to a one access and one exit, which is an immensely dangerous thing from a city to do. That was fine when there was 2 or 3 homes up there, 10 or 20 homes up there, but there's going to be hundreds of homes that have already been approved. And those are all forced through a bottleneck of growth. And to bifurcate that traffic flow to multiple different access points is not only safe, it's smart. I have a daughter with special needs. I've had an ambulance to my home multiple times. Minutes matter. And if you lock us in with hundreds of homes with a single access point, that is a dangerous road to go.
Thank you.
My name is Jordan Collins. I live at 1593 Rosanna Lane. I wrote down my comments so I can try to get this in within 3 minutes.
Okay.
So I have one question for the Planning Commission and the members of the City Council. Would you add your name to the agreement, this conservation easement, as being personally and financially liable for any dispute that might arise from this agreement?
Well, I don't think we're going to answer the question right now,
Right.
but you're welcome to pose
I would imagine the
hypothetical
answer.
questions.
I would imagine the answer is no. And if so, why would we force the Alpine taxpayers to be financially liable for the same risk? Our city's already been on the losing side of a legal dispute, and our property taxes were raised for that judgment. There are serious concerns that we're failing to address that the conservation easement makes much more difficult to fix in the future, which in and of itself seems like it could be a lawsuit waiting to happen. The biggest potential factor is the dangers and safety concerns of not opening up the secondary access point to Box Elder subdivisions. I could speak for 30 minutes on the seriousness and the dangers of this issue, and I hope the council will allow us time to voice and hash out these concerns prior to handcuffing us by signing a binding agreement into perpetuity. This conservation easement seems not only to be about protecting Lambert Park, something that I think all of us desperately want to do. It seems to be much more about the secondary access point to Box Elder subdivisions and blocking that, funneling all that increased traffic through one access point along miles of that road that are narrow with no shoulder nor sidewalk, where our children are standing and waiting for buses and forced to walk a mile or half a mile to a mile to that bus stop because the bus can't get up there, is a serious concern. This agreement seems to be written to stop this road from going through, which would alleviate the most serious and dangerous concerns of all these residents. If the conservation easement really is being rushed through to stop that road, then you can bet lawsuits will likely pile up. If this is really about protecting Lambert Park, put the road through, and then let's talk about protecting Lambert Park. Protecting Lambert Park is something we all want, but doing it to block the access to a secondary access point into Box Elder neighborhood so residents on Moyle Drive can keep their street from being a through street shouldn't be the reason we rush this conservation easement through. I don't begrudge anyone on Moyle. I have lots of friends on Moyle Drive. I don't begrudge them for not wanting that road to connect. If I lived on Moyle, I probably wouldn't want it either. However, there are far more people that don't live on Moyle now that desperately want and need that road to connect. The residents that want that road to connect far outnumber those who don't. And it's not just about convenience, it's about safety. No modern neighborhood or area is rarely ever allowed to develop without two access points. This common rule is put into place for very simple and important safety reasons. This is a liability in our eyes, and we want to be on record that it's noted and understood. Let's take the time to address that issue before handcuffing us into perpetuity.
Thank you.
My name's Brant Bishop. I live at 1331 East Box Elder Way, not Trail or Drive, or many of the others. To put that in context, what that means is there's no house in Alpine that would be more affected by an increase of traffic if that road were built through from Moyle up to the top. Now, every single car that would go through that street would pass right in front of my house. There's no other house that would be more affected. That said, it seems to me a profound mistake to remove from the people of Alpine's discretion what to do about the traffic patterns and put it in the hands of a third party who is not an Alpine resident. I agree with all the comments that have been said before and just have a few more observations. What's been characterized as the disadvantage of leaving it to the discretion of the Alpine City Council, that the future commission or future councils can undo whatever this council does, is actually the advantage of doing it. There are virtually no public policy decisions that are so important that we would completely remove them or should completely remove them from the discretion of policymakers to revisit. Provisions of the Constitution that we regard as the most fundamental law of the land are not immune from being revisited through a process of amendment. Turning over the rights to conservation and to the definition about what conservation would entail or what issues to litigate over conservation to a third party who's not even a party, who's not even a citizen of the polity, seems to me to be a big mistake. It removes the discretion not only from the city council, but from the citizens of Alpine. Future development, future changes, future policy issues that come up would be outside of the discretion of the city council or the citizens to decide. Likewise, to characterize the easement as providing maximum flexibility for the city council strikes me as very naive for some of the reasons that have been mentioned. But in addition, I want to note that whenever you give rights, property rights to a third party, you necessarily implicate them in decision-making processes. So saying that definitions of permitted uses have been included in prohibited uses to provide maximum flexibility, while I understand the council's effort to do so, that's simply naive. When you give the right to a third party who has a particular policy agenda to make decisions or to interpose itself in decision-making that may affect that area, you forfeited flexibility. Giving an easement is the opposite of retaining flexibility. It's forfeiting the right to define what will happen with property in the city.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Jane, how are you?
Hi,
Good to see you
good,
again.
good.
Um,
State your name.
my
and
name is
address.
Brian Hoffines. I won't forget that. And I live at 1622 Prospector Lane up in the Box Elder area. A number of years ago, I stood here when I was penalized for something someone else did. There were people who were up at the shooting range that had shot with illegal bullets that were explosive, started a fire. So the city council decided we're gonna close off access up there by putting up signs saying motorized vehicles couldn't go in there anymore. I wasn't responsible for anything that happened up there. And I came and talked to the city council and said, hey, you're penalizing the wrong people. People who are up there had a lawful and legal right to be there. They just used the wrong ammunition. And now I've lived here 30 years with my ATVs roaming around all the roads and trails up here. And now I can't. And my ATV sat in my house, in my garage for the last however many years, because I was told it was going to be permanent, temporary. Now I'm hearing it's going to be permanent. Those are the things that happen with government. They make a decision that's going to be, oh, everything's going to be fine. We still have control. Everything's good. And then it turns out it's not that way. Now, we've heard some people talk about that. Everybody also knows that I was very vociferous about not having the density increased in Box Elder South or Lambert. And Wayne is here and he can attest to that. He's a good friend, I think, maybe not, but we lost and more density was brought in. And I knew, and everybody knew that was fighting this, that if that happened, there was going to have to be some kind of consideration made for an ingress and egress out of there because of what was going to happen with the impact. And that needs to be discussed. And it really needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Hi, my name's April Cooper. I live at 717 East, 100 South in Alpine. First, I just wanted to put on record that I'm assuming we're going to have multiple public hearings because this one we didn't get a full document. So we got 30 pages of a conservation easement published, but we haven't seen all the exhibits. And I would imagine for it to be legal and proper, we should be able to see the entire agreement before we have a real public hearing. But that's okay. I know our city leaders have said several times that they're willing to do multiple public hearings because they know this is important to us. I also think 3 minutes is too short for any of us to really get out what we want to say. And I need to put on record that I was a little bit disappointed that the advertising wasn't greater about this meeting. We weren't willing to put it in a newsline. We weren't willing to send a text to the residents, but we're sure willing to send a text when we have water shortages, and we'll put other things in the newsline. So I don't know if it's our city leaders that are playing coy, that they don't know how to get the information about this meeting out to the entire city, or they just really didn't want to and wanted to keep it as small as possible. But I've got some solutions for them. We should put it in the December and January newslines. We should send out a text a week before the meeting and a day or the same day of the meeting. And I just want to tell a quick story. So 18 years ago, Jason Thielen and I ran for city council as well as a lot of other people. I think Kimberly Arnold Bryant and a few, maybe David Adams or Kent Hastings, I can't really remember. But Jason and I both lost. And the mayor was kind enough to put us on a committee that was for parks, including Lambert Park, recs, and open space. And I spent a lot of years serving on that committee with Everett Williams, Dave Fotheringham. I think there was a Higby on that committee, Larry Barlow. And one of the things we did with Creekside, because Creekside was so important to the whole city, was we did a charrette. We separated off into tables. We had one committee member at each table and 10 or 12 residents, and we worked through Creekside. We listened to opinions. We put tennis courts and different things on it. I think Lon Lot brought the site plan and the little scaled versions. So I think at a minimum, so that we can have a compromise between the people who want an easement and the people who don't, that this spring we should do a charrette and do some working groups and talk through this. Because all of the opposition, when the mayor gave us this summer at the open houses, sure, we can do like 20 years instead of perpetuity, was just to pacify everybody that wasn't interested in this. And sure enough, the documents come out and it's exactly what they wanted to put out in the first place. They haven't really listened to our public comment. So I'd like to just say that this is premature and we need to do some more meetings and have a legal document to review.
Thank you.
Was your name April Cooper?
Yes.
Sorry, okay, just wanted you to know that we did get your email, and I think most of us probably got a chance to read it, even though it was very long, but very well thought out. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have anyone else who has public comment that they would like to make? Okay, we'll give you just a few more and
I'll come as a citizen, Troy Stout, 747 South, 1130 East. I just wanted to stop and just say for a moment, and I don't want to interrupt the hearing, but I wanted to
No, you're
give
welcome.
my comments as a resident. I'm an avid mountain biker, as most people know by now, and I often use the trails over in Draper. And today I made a call to Draper City to find out just how many of those trails are in the conservation easement. And if you can imagine 20 times the size of Lambert Park, it's 4,000 acres, 4,200 acres. And in my view, that was a wise decision for them to set aside that property because everybody gets to enjoy it now and in perpetuity. I asked about the nature of their conservation easements. They are being held by the county, by Salt Lake County. So they also put it in the trust of an outside organization. They are in perpetuity, so they will not be interrupted. And they are growing. They're proposing more. And there's a reason for that. It's because it's a good idea. Provo is doing the same thing. Lehigh, Harriman, Riverton, they're all doing it. And so for us to sit here and really try to throw arrows at it, it makes sense to challenge the theory, but it also makes sense to look at the positives and to understand that land, they don't grow it on trees. They don't make any more. And for us to hold it and keep it makes sense. So everybody can continue to enjoy it. One of the comments, a lot of people have commented on this in the past and said that we're not taking enough time. Well, we've been doing this since last February and we're still doing it. We are still taking time. We are being methodical and careful about it. We have designed an agreement that is carefully thought out and can still be amended. It can still be changed. And so those things that the public is saying right now can be taken into consideration. So what we're asking the planning commission to do is evaluate it and look at it as it pertains to our ordinances and our laws. And if they can do that, and if it doesn't conflict, then a positive recommendation seems logical. If it does conflict, then we need to name what areas are conflictive. Thank you.
thank you.
So quick question,
Yeah.
and would it be to Mayor Stout or Mr.
Just
Stout
Troy.
resident?
Just
Troy.
So as our still current mayor, I think, right?
Yeah,
Till at least
for a little
January.
while.
What would be your comments then, just to the voters and citizens of Alpine behind you? How would you address their stated concerns about taking the discretion away from future mayors and city councils by putting Lambert Park in a conservation easement in perpetuity?
I would say that there are often things that we cannot change in the future, and some of those things for better and some for worse. This document is being written in a manner that will allow future mayors or future councils to augment it, to change it, to tweak it as needed. The thing that we're protecting long-term is the transfer of ownership. It cannot be sold, cannot be developed. Within the management, and I'll let Steve take over the explanation of this because I've taken more than my time, but the conservation easement is one document. The management agreement is another one. The management agreement is the nuts and bolts of the conservation easement. The easement itself protects in perpetuity the public access, the public enjoyment of the property. The management can be changed by future mayors, by future councils. And so there is flexibility built into it.
Do we have a management document yet?
Not yet, we don't. We're looking at this document first and then a management document will be created. If this
And
one
we can
moves forward.
have our attorney speak to that after we
Yeah.
finish with the
Well,
public hearing.
but while we had.
Well, we got, oh, no, it's fine.
100%.
I'm just saying that's definitely something we
Yeah.
should outline. is
And the other thing
separation
that's been
of the two.
said is that there will be more liability. I think
Same
we
as
have
liability.
just as much liability now as we would have in the future with or without a conservation easement. That's all I have
Thank
unless
you.
you have more questions for me. I don't want to.
Not at this time, but we
Okay.
may do that in a minute.
It's amazing how much more nervous I am here than I am.
I know.
Weird.
Yeah. Thanks, Troy.
I'm Amanda Collins, 1593 Rosanna Lane. I just also wanted to add, I'm a mountain biker, a hiker, dog walker in the park, love it. And I just would like to point out that as of right now, there's no immediate danger to someone selling a portion of Lambert Park. There's no rush to make these decisions. You'd be hard pressed to find 5 residents in Alpine that want to sell off portions of Lambert Park, let alone city councilmen to do that. And so we do not need to rush this document at all. Paraphrasing last week, Jason Thielen in the city councilman meeting said, I like the idea of the conservation easement, but I'm troubled by the details of it. And until the details of a legally binding document is the only important thing. You can have an overall statement, but if the details are not right in a legal binding document, then it's not accomplishing its purposes. We're leaving it up to how lawyers and judges define a legal document and not what we intended. So the detail, every single detail needs to be decision needs to be made with 100% clarity, no ambiguity of what the residents want and what the residents will want in the future. And if there's any question of what we will want in the future, it should not be signed and it should not be done. Thank you.
My name is Sarah Blackwell. I live at 457 Eastview Drive. And I know there's a lot of people that have expressed concern or opposition, but I am in favor of conserving and protecting Lambert Park long-term. And I am opposed to paving a road through Lambert. So I know there've been a lot of people in favor of those things. So I thought you should just hear from someone, a resident of Alpine, who is in favor of no road through Lambert and conserving it long-term. So.
Great. Thank you for bringing up a different point of view.
My name is Alice Cosper and I live at 1006 East Village Way. And I'm a little late to the party on this. I didn't open the document until I hadn't been paying attention, but I've been walking in Lambert Park for 30 something years. And it's already changed more than I would like to see it with the creation of new trails. And so I would very much like to see it left in its natural state. And in reading through this, the thing that concerned me, and it's a very specific thing, but it's on page 11 under management plans, talking about possibility of a cemetery and pickleball courts. I can't see any way that that would fit into a natural park. So I'd
Thank you.
just like to go on record about that. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Alice. See, did someone in the back want to come up? I knew I saw you stand up a couple times almost.
Brenton Frazier, 1158 Moyle Drive. I am right there on Moyle Drive, and so I'd like to first and foremost say that I'm okay with traffic going past my house, and I'm okay with things being done proper and right, and I don't want to make it in any way about preserving my property. What I do know is the 40 years that I've been here in Alpine and that I've seen things develop, I like what I've seen. I love the neighbors who have moved in, and I didn't know that there's proposed hundreds of lots up there that are developing. I know that Alpine is a bedroom community, and when you move into a place, you look at what it is and you know that what it is how it is. You buy it on that expectation, and you move in for that expectation. I know that the more roads, the more power lines, the more water lines, the more utilities, everything you put through, the more you're allowing homes and development and all that to just continue to grow, push through. And so I'm a big proponent for preserving Lambert Park, a place that I grew up playing in and that my kids love and that we go biking and walking in. And at the same time, allowing for proper development. I'm just alarmed at a lot of the things that have gone in recently that are so big and so fast. And forgive me for saying this, but South Box Elder kind of felt like it was snuck in without a lot of public approval or without a lot of thinking. It was developed. And where are the rest of the hundreds of proposed homes going to go? Where are those going in? So obviously, if we create a huge bottleneck for ourselves, we've got to create a second road and we've got to create a second easement. But I would be really cautious about that, because when you do that, you're providing it for the people who are there. But now what else are you doing? You're just creating another huge open for developing everything else until what's left? Nothing. It's all gone. I'm already alarmed to go up there and see paved stuff and little restrooms and things like that. Again, I love beauty, and I think that all of that is great, but sometimes we have a little piece of land. It's kind of like an old violin, and you just have to make the decision, put it in a case, keep it that way, and usually end up with far fewer regrets down the road with that. Just saying. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Brenton. Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment?
I'm sorry, I had another engagement. I couldn't be here.
No problem. Just
earlier,
state your
I
name
don't
and
know.
address.
My name is Gil Greer. I live at
Mhm.
1523 Box Elder Drive. So obviously I'm up there somewhere.
Gotcha. One of the Box Elder
we were-
Drive Road trail
Well,
lane
right.
path.
Well, the issue has always been is putting this into the conservation easement going to solve the problem? Is there an easier way to solve this? Is the conservation easement the Trojan horse to stop what should be happening in a road? We have Mr. Patterson here, who originally told the Box Elder residents years ago, when Box Elder was done, that Moyle Drive would go all the way through, from Box Elder through. Then we had the same developer. He's done a wonderful job of developing the town. We appreciate everything they've done, but they also told the county they'd have a secondary access out of Box Elder South when it was completed. And as of yet, all we have is an emergency road that generally works, but we were all here, many of us were here when we had the flooding and the fire several years back. And that road was totally inundated. The creek over Box Elder Creek was flooding. No one in Box Elder South could have left their homes. Emergency vehicles could not have entered their community at all. And we had a very tenuous bridge at Dry Creek. I've talked to, then at that point in time, Ron Devi, who's a friend of ours, you all know him, was working for the city. And had he not gone to that bridge with his backhoe, that bridge would have gone out. Because he was there removing debris so that bridge wouldn't wash out. We are hopeful that there'll be a new bridge put over that road. I mean, I know that the city is planning on that, which would be wonderful. But we have to have a secondary access. And I hope that the conservation easement allows for, if we're going to have one, that allows for these roads to go through. I agree with the lady that spoke earlier. I don't want a pickleball court up there. There's other places to do pickleball courts. That's a pristine area. You know, it's an outdoor area. It should be left like that. We all agree with that. They won't even let us. We had some kids helping us clean up weeds, said you can't remove certain weeds because they're protected in Lambert Park. I'm going, well, they're absolutely ugly. And if you ever fall down on them, they tear you up, but it is what it is. So I just hope we're not precluding a logical transition, because we right now have the county approved South Box Elder. You are yet to annex it into the city, which it should. I'll get out of here. But you have an
15
issue
seconds.
that
Go
was
ahead.
created from before, and I hope we can resolve it in some way that will be beneficial to the entire community. It's not asking for, there's no other development up there. It's not like you're going to use that road and then access other development. It's surrounded, literally surrounded by forest and homes now, and there's no other area to develop in there. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Dan Lariviere. I live on Ponderosa Drive. We moved here about 2 years ago and absolutely love Alpine. It is just amazing. And Lambert Park was one of the main draws that brought us here. So we mountain bike. I have 7 kids, and I love that I can just send them out there to ride. They're safe, they're protected, everything's great. I moved here from Lehigh, and I was there for 20 years before Pioneer Crossing went in. And Lehigh, I think, is the antithesis of what we want here in Alpine. I mean, the growth is uncontrolled. When you put Pioneer Crossing in, guess what happened to the development out there? It enabled all the development in Saratoga Springs, and traffic is just crazy. So I know from experience that putting in access roads leads to more development, more chaos, more traffic, more houses. And I would say that bifurcating Lambert Park into 2 sections with a major road through it would change the feel and nature of it. So I just want to be another voice in support of the conservation easement. I think there's probably ways to meet everyone's needs to make the one road that's coming out safer, put in a better bridge. But I just wanted to be another voice in support of these. The conservation.
Thank you. Appreciate your opinion.
I'm Catherine Allen. I live at 523 800 South, 520 West, sorry. So I don't live up by there, but I can still enjoy Lambert Park. What I have found lately, I agree with not doing a conservation easement. And a lot of the reasons why have already been said. I'm not for or against a road. I just think that Alpine can manage Lambert Park without a conservation easement. I think it should stay in Alpine City hands. And the thing I wanted to say that was different was that I've been talking to a lot of people lately. And whenever I mention Lambert Park, they're like, what? There's so many people that have no idea what's going on with Lambert Park. And I said, well, they had an open house. Well, I didn't know what that was about. So they had no idea what an open house for Lambert Park meant. They had no idea. It wasn't explained to them. I haven't, and the people that I have talked to are against it. And I just wanted to say that I think that the public has not had proper education on what's going on or input. There's a few people that do, obviously, that are affected by it, but a lot of the rest of the city have no idea. And I think that they need more input and an opportunity to know exactly what's going on and to understand what the open house means and why it's being discussed.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to take a second just to comment really quickly. I guess that's a theme that I've seen over the years. It seems like no matter how we post or notify or do anything. It seems that there's always people, I don't know how we can actually get the word out more than through our public processes, but there's been some ideas given tonight that we can definitely take back, but it's just an ongoing, yes, exactly. I mentioned that there've been some great ideas given tonight, but it is definitely a challenge most weeks here in Planning Commission. No one is here, and yet we notify everything that we do. So I know as a citizen, sometimes I open and read the newsletter the next month, I have to confess. Okay, would anyone else like to add some additional insight? We'll go for about 5 more minutes on this because of our limitation to time, unless there's some really strong.
Craig Skidmore, and I'm at 13447 Alpine Cove Drive. And I have been very much involved with Lambert Park, was trail master for about 5 years, and maybe a third of those trails up there I was involved in creating. I think what I've heard so far tonight is that first, I am for a conservation easement up front. The last time we sold off a chunk of Lambert Park, I'll have to admit it was wonderful. We got the Alpine North Stake Center, which wouldn't be there if we hadn't sold that chunk of property. And at the same time, we sold Sunbrook Circle. That area was a chunk of Lambert Park, and actually was the access to Lambert Park before the city sold it. And yes, we did use the money wisely. We used it to pay off a loan on Burgess Park that we had. So that happens. Okay, so what I have heard today is that we need to have a management plan, and that management plan will help let us know what's there, how it can be used. I have also heard here that it's possible to modify this agreement so that putting in the road or the extension to Moyle Drive is a potential part of what could be done. And that may be a very simple thing to do, is to add that to this agreement and go ahead and pass it. I would like to see Lambert Park preserved so that whichever way the winds go in the future in terms of the city council, we do not lose it, but at the same time have the option to do some of the things that we might want to do in the future. The most notable mentioning today was the potential extension of the road into Box Elder. That's my comment.
I'm Keith Clark, and I live on 904 Quail Ridge, so not involved with any of the traffic situations that we're discussing tonight. But I'm very much in favor of a conservation easement. I've been here for 25 years and enjoyed that park completely the whole time I've been here. And I think that it provides the city the additional resources it needs to protect it, because I've seen it not be protected, and I've seen mayors come and go. I've seen the fire chief for Lone Peak Fire Chief stand up and say, no, we shouldn't be developing up above there. We need more access, and it was still developed. So I think with a conservation easement, we'll get the resources that we need to help protect it. And I agree, there probably should be some more input on the management agreement. And I think there's plenty of time to do that. And just thank you for everything that you guys have been doing. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I think we're going to end the public hearing portion unless someone has something that they would like to state that has not been stated before. Okay. All right. Okay.
My name's Kevin Mills. I live at 36 South Wildflower Drive. And my comment is more, I love our city and I love our country and I love the freedom that we have to be able to come to meetings like this and share our opinions. And one of the most important things to me in government is the responsibility that we have as citizens to come together.
Because we can argue and present different points of view all day long. And most of the time, we all want the same thing. I haven't heard one person say today, we don't want to protect Lambert Park. The differences come in how we go about it. And the only way that we can come to consensus is to be united in voice and say, hey, we want to come together on the one point of protecting the park and also the safety of the citizens. And how do we do that? What's the best way as a community to get what we want? I don't know if a conservation easement is the best thing to do. And I don't know if not doing one is the best thing to do. What I do know is that if we're united and less divided, that we have a better chance of doing that.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Great final comment. So, okay, go ahead.
One more final comment.
If one additional final comment, if you have something, go ahead.
Okay, Dan Bender, 13157 North Oak Hill Drive.
Mhm.
So I really just wanted to clarify this this man's comment.
Mhm.
I don't think that there is anywhere else for that road to service additional lots, because like I think Gil said, Lambert Park Estates is basically a V8 or a circle,
Mhm.
right? It's cut off by houses. There's nowhere else for that road to go. Am I correct in that assumption, that statement?
There's the land above the development is Forest Service. We can address that and more clarify it after if we want to.
Yeah, I'll just clarify. So Moyle Drive connects into what's Lambert Park South or Lambert Park Estates.
Mhm.
That area where most of the development is occurring is actually in the county. It's not in the city. So some of you said, how did that slip in? How did that happen? Because it's in the county, that's how it happened. The city had no say on that. And then the other comment I would like to clarify is there's been comments about hundreds of homes going in up there. As a city planner, I have not seen any plans for that, and I don't see how you could fit 100 homes up there under the
I
current
think
zoning.
that's the point I wanted to clarify with my time, is that building that road out there provides an improved safety for the homes that have already been approved. Those lots are going to be built, and you're gonna have that many more people that right now have to go down Grove Drive, where there's no sidewalks, where there's children waiting for school buses.
Mhm.
It's already not safe. And then you've talked about potentially building a bridge and improving that culvert there. How are you gonna do that with no other access? How is everybody gonna get to and from their homes while you build that bridge? I mean, you can do it in half and half, I understand that, but there's almost always a second access to a subdivision. The way it is right now, it's not safe. I know that point's already been made, so I'll belabor it. But putting this access road in, I guess the point I wanted to make was, it will service the people that already are the homes that are already approved, and it won't service future developments somewhere else.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, great. Okay, we'll now close the public hearing portion of the Lambert Park Conservation Easement. And I just want to remind you that the Planning Commission will discuss the things that they've heard and what our questions are and comments are at this point. And then we just would appreciate like no booing, cheering, eye rolling at us. I just want to point out that, that obviously Planning Commission members are selected by the mayor, interviewed and appointed. And the city council and mayor are people that we have elected based off of, what we've chosen as the best representation for our city to spend all the time studying these things that, most of us don't have time to. So want to thank them for all of their work and understand that there has been a lot of work put into this, and there's a lot more work that will go into it. And I'm sure this isn't the last time I will see all of you. So let's just go ahead and start with the Planning Commission members. And let's just go around and just talk about, any points that you heard that you wanted questions answered to from our attorney who's here, or from the city planner, or from the city engineer. So let's just start with Jeff and kind of go around, and each of us can get our questions. I also wanted to mention that Ethan Allen, I'm sorry, Ethan, I did not notice you, but Ethan is a member of Planning Commission, and he is joining us via Zoom tonight. So, Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I don't know if I have any specific questions. I mean, I highlighted a number of concerns in the document that we got.
Mhm.
But I am for the easement.
Mhm.
And I appreciate everybody coming and voicing concerns. Because I think that those are important, and I didn't hear any concern that hasn't already been voiced. So I know that those concerns are being heard, and we want to be able to address them, but I don't have any questions. I mean, my main comment would be on seeing the management plan, because I think that that's an important piece, and that was brought up by a few people. So.
Thank you. Before we go on, I just wanted to check with our attorney. Some of the things we do in planning commission are strictly administrative and based on ordinances. Occasionally, we have things like plat amendments that are legislative in nature. And our recommendation is based off what we think is best for the city. What kind of category would this fall under? Are we looking at this to see if it meets the city ordinances? Or are we looking at this from the eyes of, do we think this is in the best interest of the city?
To be candid, it's a little bit of both.
Okay, that's okay. That's why I want to clarify it.
But you don't make a legislative decision, you make a recommendation to the city
Exactly.
council.
Thank you.
Who will then make a policy or legislative decision as to whether to enter into the conservation easement. So,
but the mayor made that point specifically, that it's our job to vote in favor of this if we find that it is compliant with our ordinances. And I've been scratching my head.
What ordinance?
Yeah, there's no ordinances I can see that have any bearing on this. Can you clarify that?
yeah, I'm not as familiar with all of your ordinance scheme as I would like to be, but the reason this document is here before you for a recommendation is a
Because of
result of an
ordinance.
ordinance
Yeah.
that says that when you're dealing with park property such as this, you have to get a recommendation from the planning commission.
Okay.
So
whether it fits into that ordinance of the park property is that ordinance portion of it. Thank you. I want to note that we appreciate the attorney, and they are fairly new with Alpine City, maybe a year.
yes,
Something like that, where so we're still getting to familiar, but they represent several cities and are experts in this area. We're really lucky to have them. So Austin, do you have anything to add to that last question that I had?
I would just add to what Steve was saying, that's pertaining to our open space ordinance. So if you look specifically at the open space section of our development code, that's where we get the supermajority vote and the requirement to have a public hearing and the recommendation from planning commission.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. Alan?
Okay. Give me some time here.
You don't have to answer you don't have to ask every question at once, but go right ahead.
Yes,
We
I
do need to discuss.
While
all
I have the
this.
floor.
All right, you got it.
So
Your mic is on, right?
it's on.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, Steve, we're gonna. I'm just basically on a kind of a quest for understanding tonight, to understand this a little bit better, because at the end of the meeting, we've really got three options, and one is to recommend approval. One is to recommend that the city council deny, and a third option is just to table. Possibly as we look for more information to be able to either decide A or B.
let me just raise a fourth option that was maybe unspoken, but that is to make a recommendation to make modifications to this document. I would fully expect if there's some things that give you pause or concern, or you want to see things changed, that you would alert the city council and the city attorney to that. And then that would be the basis for your recommendation. Now, if you're not prepared to do that, you certainly could table it and discuss it further.
Can I ask one question, Alan, on that?
No, it's my
See,
turn.
I interrupt him all the time. The floor is not really yours.
Oh.
No, I'm just kidding. But do we have to do the management agreement and the conservation easement at the same time? That's why I'm a little bit confused. on,
So
That was one of his
I was gonna
questions.
ask that question.
that's, so whose question should I answer? Yours or his?
Do you want
Since
to
you're the chair,
restate it? He can
since you're the
restate it.
chair, I'll
Yes,
direct my
I
response to you.
defer to the chair.
I
I'm
just
the
want
vice.
to
So-
move, you know.
So the way the document is written now, so there are all kinds of conservation easements out there. And there are other third parties that get involved with conservation easements. Nature Conservancy, Utah Open Lands, there are a number of them. If you look at those, like Bridal Veil Falls was a Utah Open Lands conservation easement. If you look at those documents, very often they are accompanied by a management plan, and that's attached to the easement itself. I've not been at all of the city council meetings where input has been given in work sessions. So when I did this last iteration of this document, I was responding to notes from people who were there of comments that were made. But one of the comments and one of the concerns I think that has been raised is if we're locked into a management plan, the rules and regulations for how we treat Lambert Park, do we add a trail here? Do we delete a trail? Do we move a trail? Do we have hours of operation for public safety? Do we close the park at 10 o'clock at night? Are there different rules for winter usage than there are for summer usage? Those kinds of things, those kinds of details, I don't think are appropriate in a conservation easement document that gets recorded. I think those are discretionary for the city to make those decisions about how the park will be used, as long as it's consistent with the conservation values. And so the way this draft operates now, and you certainly can change it, but the way it operates now is you're not bound by a management plan that's in a document that you can't change. Or you can only change by meeting certain thresholds that are very difficult to meet. We did it so that the city would have the flexibility to change the management plan every 2 weeks if it wanted to, without getting approval from anybody. So the management plan ends up being a permitted use. And anything the city reasonably comes up with in a management plan that's consistent with preserving the park in its natural habitat, you can come up with on your own. So some people have expressed they would like to see that before the conservation easement is recorded. I think that's a legitimate concern. It will take a while to have a management plan prepared. If you look at the one that I sent you the link to in that document, it's 93 pages. It's much longer than the conservation easement document itself. So it would take, again, more input from the community and more input from community leaders as to how you want that management plan to be drafted. I will say this just as an aside. It's so wonderful to have community input. And that's what this public hearing is all about. If the city enters into a conservation easement, it ought to be the conservation easement that the citizens want. And it can be tailored, as the mayor mentioned, that nobody's locked into this document. If there are things that you recommend be changed or modified in this document, you can make that recommendation and it can still be modified. Nobody's locked into this.
Right.
So I took way too long.
No, you
answering your
didn't.
question.
Okay, so I would imagine, like some of my colleagues here on the planning commission and also probably a lot of the citizens of Alpine, when I started hearing the term conservation easement, I'm like, a conservation what? Conservation easement. So hence a little bit of education. Just doing some, letting my fingers do some Google work. The Land Trust Alliance defines a conservation easement as a voluntary legal agreement between a landowner and a land trust or government agency that permanently limits his use of the land in order to protect it and its conservation values. Going on there and reading, okay, what are the pros and cons of a conservation easement? I thought this was instructive. Conservation easements are complex documents, which Steve would probably agree with innumerable moving parts, and it's important that landowners, or in this case, residents, fully understand all of the legal implications and risks prior to moving forward with the process. Conservation easements are, quote, in perpetuity, and that's what ours sounds like it is. So decisions related to them must be thoroughly considered, as they are about as permanent as you can get in the world of real estate. As I was reading through this, Steve, understand too that a lot, that most conservation easements, maybe you'd know this, maybe not, seem like most conservation easements had to do with private landowners. I read one, for example, the Redford Trust recently selling Sundance, sold it with a conservation easement. Basically, look, the sales price is probably a little bit lower than might otherwise have been because Redford required there be a conservation easement about how and where future development could ever be done to maintain, basically the character of Sundance, not turn it into, Park City or Deer Valley or something else, which I would agree with. So I suppose most of them are in the context of private landowners, but it's also not uncommon, I guess, for municipalities like Alpine, for a variety of reasons to consider likewise a conservation easement. But I had a question for you on this. And so reading further, I read a conservation easement is a very specific tool with a very specific purpose that is appropriate in certain cases for certain landowners. So I guess I would have a question for you, and not to put you on the defensive at all, but just as the land use attorney. A couple of questions I had for you then is, how would you answer what is the specific purpose of Alpine entering a conservation easement at this time? And then secondly, it says, make sure it's appropriate in certain cases. Why is it appropriate in this case for Alpine?
So as I said before, I'm not advocating either way. I've been tasked with drafting an easement document that meets the needs of the citizens based on input received from the citizens. So I think that's sort of a policy decision that maybe the city council or some of your elected officials ought to say, this is why we want it now. This is why we need it now. The document itself talks about the conservation purpose to forever protect and preserve the conservation values of Lambert Park, which are identified in the document. But I don't know that I'm going to try to defend it or the reason why somebody might want it at this time. Doesn't mean I don't agree with it, but
Sure. So I think Jane asked you, and some of your comments early on were the advantages of a conservation easement. What would be the disadvantages of a conservation easement?
I think what you've been raising is it's a permanent decision. Now, this document allows for amendment. It's not, and it also necessary. There are some things that could happen to dissolve this, but they're very specific circumstances and they're very difficult. I shouldn't say difficult, but they're high bars to meet. And so, but again, you can tailor this document any way you want. If you want a temporal limit on it, you can put that on it. If you want, whatever makes people comfortable. If they want to bifurcate the easement, you can do that. So I'm just here saying there are some flexibility. There's still flexibility here. And we ought to tailor it to whatever the community wants.
To a large degree, it would tie the hands of a future mayor or city council, correct? Particularly a conservation easement given in perpetuity.
Well, it would make it difficult for them to reverse that decision because it's a recorded document. It's essentially a contract that runs with the land.
So And I guess one thing I'm just kind of struggling with, Steve, and again, I don't think it's really fair to make you defend it as either, pro or con the conservation easement. I'm just, I'm a lawyer myself by training, so, you and I are probably used to throwing stuff against the wall and see what sticks and playing devil's advocate, which is more or less what I'm doing as I try to, understand what at least my own vote would be. So I noticed, I read through, and I think this might have been prepared by you, this summary, this 2-page summary.
Yes.
Of the conservation easement. You noted on this that for comparison, I'm about midway down the first page. For comparison, here are the core values the city council discussed in a work session months ago. A, to preserve permanently and provide continuing access to and use of Lambert Park as an open space for the general benefit of the public. B, to prevent the sale or use of the park for development purposes. C, to restrict the use of motorized vehicles in the park with a few exceptions. And D, to prevent the pavement or extension of roadways through the park with a few exceptions. And, I suppose that, I mean, if you asked most members of the planning commission and the city council and the mayor right now, I would say that, yeah, those are the core values, and those are the values that we all defend right now as citizens of Alpine and representatives of the citizens. And, I guess I question why we want to give a conservation easement in perpetuity on those core values when we already exist to protect those core values. And maybe that's just a statement, not necessarily a question. I'll just leave it as a statement. But last thing, Jane, then I'm almost done.
I'm biting my tongue.
I know, this is why you never
So
give me the
hard.
floor. I had a question here about the management plan. Do we have one? And that's been answered. But your summary also notes that the management plan, rules, and regulations may be amended as the city council determines, which you said, but there's a caveat to that. It says, you wrote, as long as they are consistent with the conservation values.
Sure.
And that's a capital C and a capital V. So I assume that's a term of art, the conservation values. Maybe
That's a defined term in the document itself. Yeah.
So we could have a management plan, and we could, I mean, it's only flexible in so much as that original management plan is drafted with flexibility built in, as long as it's consistent with core values, because it's not flexible in the sense that we could just go in later, some other city council or planning commission, and willy-nilly change the conservation easement. Whatever changes would have to be consistent with the stated conservation values in the easement. And so my question is, if the city really wants to do something, and who deems it contrary to the conservation values, and then if there's a dispute over a city wanting to amend the management plan, who's that dispute with? I assume it would be with
Utah Open Lands.
Utah Open Lands. I assume that would be, and then who would be the arbiter of that dispute? Does that go to court? Is that how that would be resolved?
That's the way it's structured currently.
Okay, so that management plan is
so my guess
really
is
important.
we
haven't seen that yet.
Before you got to court, you would have numerous discussions with Utah Open Lands
Sure.
as to what you want to do and whether it is consistent with the conservation values. So I've attempted, and no document is perfect, but I've attempted to add as many reserved rights as possible as permitted uses, so that there is no discussion with Utah Open Lands. By definition,
What's the timetable on a management plan?
I really can't give you a timetable, but my guess is, depends on what kind of public input you get and what kind of,
The city drives it.
the city drives it. I can draft something, but it would be my management plan. And it's really something that the city ought to say, this is what we want in our management plan. Now write it up. And, I think we're not talking days or weeks.
Okay, well, I would just say, and then I have only one more question after this comment. And that would be that it seems really, I don't really understand how as a commission tonight, we could make a recommendation to the city council that they accept the conservation easement unless and until we had a full input from the citizenry with respect to that management plan, because that really is your carve out that here's the conservation easement, but we're not going to give it to you until we, as a city, because that's in perpetuity, it's locked in. This is our management plan. So this is the elbow room, the wiggle room that we have as our core values before we give that conservation easement. So I just really struggle with how we would recommend to the city council that they pass the conservation easement, even though I think there's still problems within that, but I don't even know how we get to that point without first having a management plan in place. But last quick comment, because this came up a lot with the residents. With respect to a connector road to Box Elder South up through Moyle Drive or whatever that is, would the result of this conservation easement as it's currently drafted be to limit an additional ingress or egress to the Box Elder South neighborhood?
In addition, or that same road?
Well, I'm just saying, right now, the way that right now there's only one. My understanding is there's only one way in and out of there, and that's Grove, right? So would the effect of this conservation easement as currently drafted leave preclude any other secondary access in and out of that neighborhood to where the only way in and out in perpetuity is going to be Grove?
So
is that the effect of this conservation easement?
You bring up a very good question. So my understanding is that currently Box Elder Drive is the ingress and egress from that development. There's also an emergency access road that is unpaved but improved. And we've heard comments about that tonight. The way the document is currently drafted, any existing road, paved or unpaved, may be maintained in its historical fashion. So however that's been done, Box Elder Drive, we've carved out an exception for that to be improved and straightened and the bridge redone or whatever. So that's carved out. There is no specific carve out for Moyle Drive to be improved in the future. Some would argue that to pave that road would be inconsistent with the conservation values for the park. Other people would say that's a matter of public safety, and we've reserved that. We've reserved a number of public safety measures in the permitted uses where we don't have to ask anybody's permission. We just do it because public safety demands it in emergencies or otherwise. So I think that's a decision that's up to you to make your recommendation. And we can tighten that up and we can say under no circumstances will that ever be paved. Or we can say, if public safety demanded that in the future, that could be paved.
And so any neighborhood or any subdivision, as you know, has to have two. And there have been several cases where their emergency access road is allowed as the secondary access, like Three Falls. And like in this case, the struggle I think that we have with some of this is, and I wanted to ask this, is the county approved the subdivision and changed the zoning from 1 acre lots to half-acre lots. And maybe Austin will know, what was the secondary access plan for the subdivision for Box Elder South? Was this emergency access road accepted by the county as their secondary access road?
I am not aware of what their requirements were at the time of approval of the Box Elder South or Lambert.
So you're not
Park
aware of
Estate, so I
the
don't
county's
know.
requirements,
I
whether
don't
they
know.
require two roads or not? Okay.
So Austin, so unless they pave the Moyle right up into Box Elder South, which would completely suck for Lambert, let's be honest.
Split it.
Split it right in half with a paved road with vehicles on
traffic.
it.
Yep.
I mean, what other option is there for a secondary road in and out of Box Elder South and the other homes up in Box Elder?
So Box Elder, well, I should say Lambert Park it's a horseshoe. So if we look at this map here, let me just turn on this annotation. Bear with me.
And that's probably a
So,
whole subject of its own.
Lambert
too.
Park
It's important.
goes
Yeah.
like this. And so really, there's no way to get a road through here or here without going through Lambert Park.
Will you highlight the emergency access road right now?
So the emergency access road is,
Maybe with a different color.
is this one right here.
Yeah.
And so this,
Where's Moyle? Is that going into Moyle?
Yeah,
Moyle
this
Drive is
Moyle
this purple.
Okay.
Mhm.
The red is the emergency access. And then the yellow here, this is in the county. So all of those homes that are being developed there, that's in the county. The dividing line between the city and the county is this road right here. So if you're on the north side of the road, you're in Alpine City. If you're on the south side of the road, you're in the county.
And then will you show up above that where, if you scroll up just a little bit, where Box Elder right here is, and where the access road is for that?
Yeah, and so the existing access point is this road. It goes like this, and then it goes into Grove Drive.
And then the emergency access through Lambert Park was approved as the secondary access to allow the subdivision to be developed. But it was in the agreement that that would be an emergency access road.
No, it was court ordered.
Okay, wait, please don't call out. If you have something that you'd like to say, raise your hand, and if we need to clarify, we can. So, thanks. But anyway, that is the secondary access road to that. Okay.
Okay. Amazingly, I'm done.
Okay, great. John.
I really appreciate all the participation from our. Some of the ideas that were shared that troubled me, and that's the concept that this is in perpetuity. I just feel like within the document, under future anticipated municipal uses, that's actually part of the easement. That's not the management plan. And we're dabbling with ideas like the cemetery for 10 acres and no more than a quarter acre of land for pickleball courts. I mean, 10 years ago, pickleball courts
Commissioner,
was not a thing.
Commissioner, could I just respond to that briefly? Again, I was not at the meeting where those ideas were proposed. And I think they were passing comments so that the notes I got were put a placeholder in there. Cemetery might be a use that we want to have in a corner of Lambert Park where it would not interfere with the natural habitat. Pickleball courts, somebody threw that out. What if we wanted those and how big would that be? And someone said, well, quarter acre. Those are placeholders. You can change that any way you want. But I appreciate your comment.
My only point is that I just don't feel like we've put enough attention into it at this juncture to know what we don't know when we're talking about perpetuity. And that was just my evidence to kind of.
Sure. So we can add recommendations. I mean,
I would like to consider an equestrian center at the rodeo grounds. I mean, if it's going to be a equestrian, park, why not have some facilities that accommodate that? But as I read the easement, I don't think that would be allowed. And I don't know if that's interesting now to the city or, maybe in 50 years it might be. But I don't know what would be interesting and needed in 50 years that we would be precluded from doing as a result of having this conservation easement in place today.
So you kind of are saying that you would like the management plan to have a little more power and the conservation easement to be a little more simplified, not state out specifics. Okay. Good. Other comments you wanted to bring up? Okay.
Do you want to go with Ethan?
Well, wait, one more thing.
So following up on Alan's thoughts, a secondary access to Box Elder South would be precluded with this easement as drafted today.
Through Lambert Park.
Okay, that's
Right, yeah, Ethan, do you have any questions or discussion that you wanted to bring up?
Sure. So I was at the planning meeting at City Council when they were discussing that.
We need to mute.
And can you hear me?
Yeah, just a minute. We've just got a lot of
Okay.
feedback. So
Sorry.
maybe if we turn off our microphones, is the sound coming out of more than one? Try again, Ethan.
Okay, so I was at that planning meeting at City Council, and I felt like it was super preliminary. Like nobody really had worked out what they wanted yet. And that's kind of where I feel like on this whole document is that nobody really has it worked out yet. And it's hard for me to say that I could support anything that I don't know the details of. I think that would be hard to do. And then my biggest concern with this is the perpetuity side of it. When I moved into Alpine, Moyle Park was a shooting place and it was a motorcycle riding place. That's what people did there.
At Lambert?
At Lambert. They were shooting and they were riding motorcycles, and that's what they did. And if they'd set it in perpetuity then, that would not be appropriate today. I think that we should be concerned about what we're doing now because we don't know the needs of the city or the needs of the citizens in 30 years. It'll be difficult for us to forecast that. So that would be my biggest concerns.
Okay.
Is that first off, I don't know that I can support something, I don't know what it is. And second, I just don't know what the future holds.
Okay. Well, it sounds like everyone's kind of in agreement that we want to do some more work on this and get a little more information on it. Troy?
Yeah, I'd like to thank everybody too for their comments. It's kind of funny because I've spent quite a bit of time reading this and studying this and you know, kind of came here with an idea of what I wanted to do, and now I'm confused. So, which is probably good. That's great because I think there's been a lot of great comments, and it's all about seeing everybody else's side and their points. So somebody, I just wanted to clarify too. I think somebody brought up a comment about that we're kind of putting control into a third party's hands that don't, you know, reside here or anything. So my understanding is that's exactly opposite of what we're doing, right? I mean, they don't, this Utah open lands, they're not really going to have any say of what we do.
Utah Open Lands has, they develop resources so that they can protect the conservation values. They can protect the easement so that if somebody were to do something contrary, if they wanted to subdivide Lambert Park or they wanted to do something that was not permitted, to do some sort of development, just like at Bridal Veil Falls, somebody wanted to build a development up at the top. And that was the impetus for that conservation easement. If somebody still did that or tried to do that, then Utah Open Lands would defend the conservation values with their resources, with their money. So it's not going to be taxpayer funded, it's funded by this third party. That's their job as a public trust.
Right. So but when somebody said that, it kind of made me think like, well, that's just the opposite, right? That's why we're doing this is putting it into somebody else's hands so that they have to honor what we've structured. So.
One moment, okay.
Let's see. I mean, I will say, when I went through this and I've reviewed it and everything, I really felt like it did preserve the values of what I understand the people of Alpine to have, but yet it did allow enough flexibility to future councils to make a pretty wide range of decisions, you know?
So I felt good about it as far as that goes. I'm concerned about the road, and that's something I didn't really think about honestly before you guys brought it up. So I really appreciate you coming and bringing up those concerns, and kind of feel like that's something I'd like to have addressed, you know. Let's see, let me look at my notes here. Yeah, it's funny because I think we kind of got a little bit of a challenge on our hands as far as like, I mean, we're trying to get educated about it, and I'm sitting here thinking, well, how the heck do we educate the citizens about it if it's, you know, and
It's
so
difficult.
it's a
I
tough
mean,
thing.
it
It's a
has
tough
been
thing.
going, as the mayor said, there've been
Yeah.
work and meetings and open houses for people to come express their opinions going on since about February, I think, and several times he's mentioned it in the newsletter and posted. So it's
Yeah,
hard.
but
It's a big job to do that. So
we do
yes.
have to say though that we haven't given people a chance to see this document because it hasn't been out
Right.
until just
Yeah,
now.
they've been working on it. Yeah, just
Right. And
like
so when we
us.
say we've had open houses to discuss it, we haven't really. We've had open houses to discuss the idea of what would it be like maybe to have a conservation easement. We haven't had any discussion of what this conservation
Right.
easement
Well,
is until
and
tonight.
that's exactly, and that's where we're starting
Right.
tonight. But I'm not saying that there haven't been meetings about specifically the conservation event, but just the discussion on it. And it's ongoing. It's not an easy thing.
It's not. I would say to follow on Troy's comment. I mean, the thing is, when you say that well, future councils can, you know, have some flexibility to do A, B, C, or X, Y, Z. They will, I mean, to John's concerns about perpetuity, they will only have the flexibility to do whatever we say right now in a management plan document to do. So we're really tying the hands of any future elected official in Alpine to whatever is in the management plan and the conservation easement. So,
Right.
I mean, there may be some flexibility, but again, I almost think that as important as looking at the language of the conservation easement is looking at a management plan, because that's, I mean, you talk about a document that you've got to, you know, measure 9 times and cut once.
Right.
Yeah,
That's it.
absolutely. I think that it's important to say that, you know, conservation easements are not some new idea. This is something that has been utilized many times, and as we know, in many cities. I've been involved with it in family property as well, where and some people have said, well, this aims at developers. Well, that's usually the purpose of a conservation easement, is you're trying to conserve land in its natural state. I mean, I think there's no way around it. That is why you do a conservation easement. So if you're saying that it doesn't allow future city council members or mayors the flexibility to do anything they want with the land, that is the idea.
But I would point out, for example, I don't remember the name of the gentleman that was at the
That's
mass,
okay. You don't have to remember everybody's name.
Yeah, I better remember my own, but you know, he indicated, yeah, we love Lambert Park, but that was really great when we sold off a little bit for Sunset Circle, whatever. That was really great when we built the Mormon church on the other one.
Right.
Well, okay. But otherwise but otherwise let's tie it up. Well, yeah, when you tie it up, you'll never be able to donate a piece for another church or another this or that. And so
and that is
it's
the
tricky.
purpose.
And I would say the trickiest thing about this, honestly, or one of the trickiest, is that we're dealing with a county decision to allow to put a residential neighborhood up above there with very few options, you know.
We know all about
getting,
that.
well, we all do ad nauseam, right? Getting in and out of there, and you know, if we're going to make a decision that we're going to give Lambert Park over into a conservation easement, then that flexibility to, you know, and again, unless we're going to carve that out in a management plan as a possibility for a future. I mean, that's to me one of the one of the biggest obstacles and issues that I've, at least for me, has come out
Well,
tonight.
yep, and I can see that there are definitely two sides to this, that, like I said, that is the point of a conservation easement. Because you have seen in the past, it's been sold off here and sold off there, and the point of this is, we have this little bit of land left. Everyone has voiced that they want this land preserved and not, you know, so that we always have a Lambert Park. Now the question of how flexible we want to give people the option of future mayors and city councils, you know, of doing something in the management agreement, and is it well documented, the plan, I think, you know. There's, I think also, as was stated earlier, you can leave it to the mayor and city council of the future. Probably the reason conservation even exists is because from past history has proven that that doesn't preserve the property very well. One question I had, and that was on financial liability. If someone, I wanted to make sure I understood you correctly, that if someone challenges the management's modifications, as far as they do not comply with the values, does that cost the city or the citizens anything? Or is that, you mentioned that the trust?
Yeah, so Utah Open Lands would defend against any kind of adverse use. The question is the city going to want to make any kind of adverse use adverse to the conservation values? And if that's the case and the dispute is between the city and Utah Open Lands, then the city's going to incur some expense.
Right, okay.
I don't want to gloss over that.
No, right, okay. I just wanted to check on that. Again,
just as a matter for the planning commission, if your sentiment is and your recommendation is that you don't hamstring yourselves from being able to pave a secondary access to that development up above the park, my recommendation is don't put that in a management plan, put that in the easement itself. Make your recommendation that we're going to call that out as an exception. Maybe we don't do it today, but if public safety demanded it in the future, the city would have the right to do that.
I think that's
Jane, I also had a couple more questions for the attorney.
Yeah, now that you've heard some things, yeah.
Okay. Most of my highlighted things have been addressed, but on page 9, when it talks about leases, and this is a question to you, Steve. It says the grantor, which should be Alpine City, reserves the right to enter into management leases on the property or portions thereof. Can you describe that or define what is meant by that?
Yeah, if Alpine City decided that they wanted to turn over management of the park to somebody else, somebody maintains it, somebody does, you know, whatever, they could lease it under terms that are consistent with the easement itself. But they couldn't lease it to somebody who's going to use it for another purpose.
Okay, so thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, that was a good question.
Okay, on page. Okay, Dan, on page 20, taxes, fees. In section A, it says notices to provide the grantee, which would be Utah Open Lands, with notice of a change in ownership or other transfer of interest in the property. So explain that. That would be if Alpine was going to sell the property.
Right. So this easement, if it's recorded, will run with the land. That means it's binding on Alpine, but it's also binding on any successor in interest. If Alpine conveyed some property to somebody, I don't know why it would, because for non-development purposes, you know, there's no benefit to somebody to buy the property. But if Alpine did that, then all this is saying is that they need to notify Utah Open Lands of who the successor is. But that person would be, that person or entity would be bound by the provisions of this easement.
Okay, and then further down on D, it says, nothing in this easement prohibits Alpine from transferring the property to the state of Utah or a political subdivision of the state of Utah. So again, what would be the purpose of including that language?
If Alpine decided to transfer the park to the county, for
Okay.
example, it would be free to do so. Nothing will prohibit that. The county would be bound by the restrictions in the easement.
Okay. Okay, and so under the next section, under A, under section 11, where it says, the grantor further agrees that this property right had a fair market value on the effective date of this easement that was equal to the proportionate value of the easement.
Yeah, this goes to consideration for the easement. Utah Open Lands isn't paying the city anything for this easement. They're acting as a facilitator if the city enters into it, but it's just further bolstering the idea that there's been fair value given for this easement itself, this interest in real property.
Okay, and do we have an idea of what that fair market value is, Austin?
Of the value of Lambert Park as a total, as a whole? We don't have a number on that right now. I mean, it's. Yes.
Okay. The other ones are minor, you know,
Okay.
that are just,
Okay.
that are little things that
Okay.
we would talk about.
So I think the point that we need to get to is where we are as a council right now for wanting further discussion. Do we want to, we can make note of some of the suggestions that we have that we would like added to the document or areas that we think should be considered while still tabling it. But, you know, saying that we think these other things should be done, or we can make a negative recommendation if you want to. You can make a positive recommendation. Or again, we could add things that we think should be added, which could include the management plan if you want. What kind of discussion do we need to have that will get us to the point where we can do one of those things? Yes. And for those of you here, so one of the planning commission members needs to make a
Motion?
motion,
Yeah.
have a second, and then we'll go from there. So,
So I'll make a motion that we table voting on our recommendation for the easement, for or against, until the management plan, until further amendments, changes to the easement is done, and at least a draft of the management plan is put forth to the city and the planning commission.
okay, we have a proposal by Jeff Davis. Do we have a second?
I would actually, well, what's the process for, I want to.
We have to
I'm fine with
second
it,
it
but I wanna add a
first.
couple
We have
of
to second it,
things.
and then we can discuss it and modify it.
Okay.
So we just need a
You
second
pulling
first.
Robert's rules on us.
Sorry.
Okay.
I mean, I have a gavel too I could use.
And you know how to use it.
No. So does anyone want to second that? If not, then it fails and another motion can come forward. So, and I can't second or make any motions. So, sorry, Jeff. You would like
Anybody
to,
gonna second?
yeah. Does anybody want a second? Okay, let's make a new motion. That your Troy's like.
So
We'll make a new motion.
Just as easy to let it
I
die.
would
It
make a
is.
motion to basically just restate the same wording, the same motion as Jeff, except to add to that I would like also language include that
in a future planning commission discussion around the management plan and the conservation easement, we allow a public hearing so that we can, again, hear from the public, hear comments from the public on the updated documents as they become available and when they are provided to us in a future planning commission meeting.
Okay, so we have a motion by Alan McDonald. Do we have a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, Jeff will second it. We won't make you restate the whole motion. Basically, the same motion, requesting that in addition to that, we have at least one more public hearing with both the management plan and the conservation easement. It's getting late. Okay, do we have any discussion on that?
Yeah, I would like to add some things to that.
Okay.
In that conservation easement, I think we need to have specific language that resolves the road improvements to Grove Drive, to include anything that is going to be required to make it more safe, including enhancements to the bridge.
I wonder, John, do you think that we should say, because I think we all have a lot of suggestions, do you think that we should say that we will email suggestions, or do we really know what each different suggestion is at this point? I think.
I thought Alan, did Alan kind of covered that on a
Well,
30,000 foot view
To
kind
be fair, I
of?
mean, as long as we're discussing it, I mean, that's a good question, Troy and John, because I'm not sure that I 100% understand the next process to get things in and out
Right.
of the existing conservation easement. I mean, it
Right.
seems like that's still a draft in process,
Yeah.
a work in progress.
Yeah.
So what is the process to get suggestions in and get things
Let's
out that we don't recommend?
let's ask
Yeah.
Austin. So if Austin, if we feel like the actually, I was just gonna ask Austin, but Steve can answer too. you know.
I'm gonna defer to Steve.
Sorry, there, okay. What I just wanted to know is, since we feel like the conservation easement needs further work, and you even mentioned that there's some placeholders essentially in it. What I was going to say is, would it be better for us to forward our areas that we feel like need to maybe be reworded, or possible things that they might want to consider or add to it in an email? Or do you think that we need to state all of these in a recommendation that we're tabling something?
Well, if you're tabling, I think I would, if it were me, I would add to the motion that we're going to direct staff to make changes to the easement document itself based on input. Here's the difficulty as a practical matter.
Mhm.
There are, what, 6 of you? And you're gonna have 6 different opinions. I can do my best to harmonize, but I can't include everybody's
No, I think they would
changes.
just be
So-
recommendations.
So I think, yeah, if you want to enumerate some recommendations, the other alternative would be in another meeting for you to, before the meeting, for you to come up with lists of recommendations, changes that you would like to make to the document, then discuss that in the meeting and come up with a list
Do you think
that you're unified. If you're not,
Okay,
but we can do it either way.
okay. I'm just wondering if the city council is actually ready for, this is their final thing, go ahead.
Yeah, I
Austin.
just wanted to add, so we've been working on the general plan for a couple of years now, or maybe even longer than that. And the way that we've done changes to that document is we go through item by item, and if a council member has a change that they want to make to it, they bring that up when we go over that item, and then we see if everybody else is in consensus with that.
Mhm.
If only one person feels that way, they discuss it, and maybe it doesn't go in there, maybe it does.
Right.
But that's kind of how we've done it with that.
Yeah.
It's a different document, but
Well,
the
and
process that we've
I
used.
agree, we've done that. My question is, does the city council, when I hear things like that's a placeholder, that says to me that the city council isn't done working on this yet. do they want to,
I think they're seeking your recommendation on that.
okay,
So when I say placeholder, I'm saying I put it in because that's what I understood.
okay,
Some council members had raised, but they hadn't necessarily come to consensus.
okay.
So I
So
think,
do we just need another meeting?
I think your job is to make a recommendation to the city council as to what you want. If
Okay.
there's, if you want to direct staff to make some changes to this, otherwise, I don't know what to change.
Okay,
So
And
some,
I think we need to have some consensus amongst ourselves before directing staff to do anything. So let's discuss those points that we want to see addressed.
Within the conservation easement document.
Yeah.
so tonight you want to go paragraph by paragraph through the
No,
conservation
well,
document? and-
I don't
No.
think.
I would probably.
Now, what are the
Done that
major-
before. Another meeting, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I personally like more time to go through it, but then I'm just gonna throw this out there. I mean, I think it was April Cooper who just brought up the fact that there was a lot of citizen input and I've never heard the term before, but in charrettes, or in other words, kind of breakout groups with, you know, representatives of the city as well as interested citizen resident groups, you know, perhaps discussing issues of, you know, perpetuity, right? Look, do we really want the document in perpetuity? Or do we want it to be a 10-year document, a 20-year document? You know, there's just issues of time.
Right.
There's issues of content, right? In arriving at least what's presented to Planning Commission as a pretty complete conservation easement. Now, how they got to this particular document, I'm not 100% sure. But there are issues of duration. There's issues of pickleball courts or not, cemetery or not. There's questions of this a paved road into Box Elder South or not. And I just, you know, and I just wonder if there's been enough citizen input on what's in the easement document itself or what's not in the easement document itself, at least to the satisfaction of residents. And if we were to go down that road, what would that look like, right? I mean, how would that work to ultimately get in front of us a document that was much more complete and reflected some agreement between, you know, some consensus between, you know, resident representatives in the form of, you know, kind of like breakout groups and city representatives. I don't know what that process would look like, but it seems to me like when we're putting, if we're even considering a conservation easement, it's going to tie the hands of the city in perpetuity or some other long period of time. I'm just interested in really getting a document that's been vetted, pre-vetted and vetted again.
Yeah,
And I'm not
I
sure that we're
think
there yet.
that's the city councils. I mean, this came from them. I think they went through that process.
Well, they
don't
really,
know that
in
it-
their meeting, they were expecting Planning Commission to come up with that information. And that's where I think.
They're expecting us to.
That's the
get
language I
citizen
heard.
input.
Yeah.
And so I think that, you know, we've got,
I don't feel like it's the job of the planning commission to organize the input of the citizens to draft or redraft or modify the conservation easement.
I think that's a city council decision.
Yeah.
What the city council, I believe, is looking for from you is your best recommendation to the use of this open space. And specifically in connection with the draft easement that's been proposed. So if that means there are certain paragraphs you want to delete, or there are things you want to add, there are concepts. If you can make a recommendation on those concepts, I'm not suggesting you're prepared to do that tonight.
Right.
But based on the citizen input that you've received, you can do that. And then it's up to the city council if they want to do something further. I think, to be fair, I think they probably believed that the open houses were part of that process and people had an opportunity to voice their opinion, and some of those opinions were included into this document. So that doesn't mean it couldn't be refined further and you couldn't have further public input. I fully expect there would be more public input, but I think what they're looking for from you is your best recommendation as basically recommending lay planning commission as to what you would like to see in that park and in that open space. And if you say, our recommendation is we don't have any kind of conservation easement, that's easy to transmit that to the city council and they can respond to that. If you say, we're in favor of a conservation easement, but we want to make X, Y, and Z changes, that's easy too. And staff will have an idea. If you just speak in concepts, we can take a stab at drafting it so that it's acceptable.
Okay. So if someone using that information wants to make a motion that sits on top of the current motion, we do that and then we vote on that motion. And if someone makes a third motion before we vote on top of it, that can happen and then we vote in reverse order. So if someone has, if you guys want to vote on the motion that's been laid out, we can, or if someone would like to make an additional motion, or if we want to discuss further amendments to the motion, or whoever made the motion can strike the motion, we can start. over.
No, I don't know that I want to strike it yet, but let me just make this suggestion then. No, I think that was very helpful, from Steve. That was good input and good clarification. As we're just discussing here, I'm not adding, to the motion that's on the table. My suggestion then would just be then that okay, I understand then there's been some resident input, a fair amount of resident input with this, and also a lot of, city council input on this as well. So it seems to me like it's incumbent on us, next time we get together on this, to number one, hopefully have a management plan to review, but then perhaps, have gone, really, kind of as Jeff had done a little bit, paragraph by paragraph, and maybe we each go through with suggested additions and deletions, and then end up pretty much like maybe where this is, a week where this is the only thing on the agenda, and we should spend a good 3 or 4 hours, whatever it takes to plow through and end up with a document that we can then vote to either recommend to the city council or recommend deny to the city council. Any thoughts on that?
I don't think we have the resources to come up with a refined language. I would like to direct staff with more general, or provide them with more general direction. And then have them bring that, and then we go through on a line by line basis.
Well, that's what we've done when we created the master plan.
Well, okay.
And then after they come back, then we go through it. Like you said, in a different meeting. After we
So,
say,
I mean,
don't really like paragraph 3, we think it should say more along these lines. Yes, Ethan.
So Jane, I mean, we've been talking about the master plan. That's not an in perpetuity, right? It's just a temporary plan that we're making right now, and we've worked 2 years on that. It doesn't seem unreasonable to me that we'd put in some time on something that could be forever.
Sure, absolutely. That's what we're
Right?
doing, and like we said,
Right.
we're not. No one is saying that it's all ready to go, and we're trying to push this through tonight.
I know. So I'm just saying that I'm not worried about that we take time on it. So.
Okay.
What's our motion?
Motion to take some time.
So, I mean, if I had to say, do we want to talk about it if we're in favor of the easement overall or not?
Sure, we can. I mean, tell me what you think about easements in general. Do you like the idea of an easement or not?
So, yeah, me personally, I don't think I do
Okay,
at this point.
all right. Does we want to throw in their hat where they're at this point? Because I guess if nobody wants an.
I've already
you've already expressed
I'm in favor.
I'm on the fence because I think the duration issue is still TBD for me, and a big issue continues to be that, you know, public safety
Mhm.
and the existence of a secondary access or not.
Yeah.
And that's something that's still to
Mhm.
hash out. So I mean,
Mhm.
you know, I will say I'm somewhat skeptical of a conservative easement, but I'm on the fence. Definitely the
Yeah,
details still
I
for
mean,
me.
I fully think this is an appropriate use of a conservation easement. And I don't have a problem with the perpetuity as long as the language and the other things are set correctly, because like I said, to me, that's the purpose of a conservation easement. So I don't have any problem with that. I do want it set up correctly if we do one. It needs to be done
Yeah,
right.
but your definition correctly now may not be somebody's definition correctly 20 years from now.
Yeah,
when their hands are tied.
That's why you
That's
have
just-
them,
that's the
but
issue.
that's why you have a management plan. That's why you have a management plan, that's why you have guiding values. To me, this is a form or a way of conserving land that has been proven over and over and again, and is widely used by cities that have resources far more than Alpine City to research, and attorneys and everyone else involved, and they do it. And
So-
developers do it all the time. So to me, I don't see any problem. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, and I mean, but there are examples of cities who have set these up and now they have some things they aren't happy about.
Sure,
And
and if they're
now
not
they
set up
can't
right,
use them because they set them up wrong.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's a pretty big concern.
Yeah, and then that doesn't necessarily mean that the concept is bad. It means it was implemented poorly. To me, that's just my opinion. John, do you want to?
Yeah,
voice your opinion if you
I've
wanna?
really been trying hard to understand the need for this conservation easement. For me, it basically rests with a lack of trust in our future generations. And I tend to be optimistic about the future. I think that my kids are going to make good decisions in the future.
Oh, mine aren't.
What do you call the future? Tomorrow? Because that is not happening.
Yeah, I know.
But what do you think, why do you think
I-
about the other uses of conservation easements then? Do you think there's a proper use of a conservation easement?
I think they're great when they're private easements or grants.
Private
It
property
makes all
only?
kinds of sense when the grantor is getting tax benefits and setting aside land that would otherwise be developed.
No one can develop the farm.
You know, I think that it's great purposes. I've been wrestling with trying to understand the benefits to the city. We're not getting any tax, we're not a taxpayer. We're not, I mean, sometimes I would have guessed that there are federal programs where they would reward government entities for giving easements. Is that true, Steve? Is that ever out there?
Boy, I don't know the answer to that.
I mean, is
but
there ever-
certainly
is there
are
ever a
incentives-
financial
There
incentive?
certainly are incentives for private landowners.
Yeah, yeah.
But the benefit to the city and the citizens is open space.
Well, we have,
That is
we
good.
have it. We just don't trust the future will protect it.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, that's why we're talking. We
Yeah.
have different opinions. on it.
And so I just feel like that the risk of doing something that we don't know, what we don't know
Mhm.
is too great
Okay,
to enter into it.
all right. Troy?
Well, I mean, I'm mostly in favor
Mhm.
of it. But you guys got good arguments, so, yeah.
Well,
I
there's
mean, yeah,
always-
I
there's
just,
always
yeah,
good- There's
yeah.
always valid points on
Yeah.
both sides. That's why decisions are
Yeah.
hard.
I mean, I think I'm in favor of it. There's a few things I'm concerned about in it, so.
Okay. So,
Hey, so along these lines, we are down 2 members.
Mhm.
What number?
just one.
One.
Ethan's
Oh,
on the
there we go. That's
TV.
right. Ethan's big head is right there.
So, yeah.
on my screen.
Yep. We are down one
So we're
member
down
and,
just one.
yeah.
Sorry, you don't really have a big head. It's just, you're just projecting on the screen as big head. You have a big brain, but not a big head.
Mm-hmm.
Are we, so is Carla, are we gonna have another member sometime in?
Yeah,
January?
it takes, well, I don't know exactly when, but it takes some time. The mayor will,
Jeff just showed up
Get-
overnight. One day wasn't there, the next day he was.
I know, it was magic. After a couple months and 20 interviews and a FBI background check, it's that he showed up.
Can I ask you a question? Do we have any kind of data that shows kind of how the citizens generally are weighing on this whole thing, or is there anything?
I don't
out
know
there
that
like
I don't know that they took data on the input. Do you know of anything?
Because I would guess.
So citizens who came to the open houses and to the other public meetings on this were, and I think all of the citizens, Austin will know the details, but they were offered a survey and offered an opportunity to weigh in.
Okay.
And
Do we have the survey results?
So if you go to utahopenlands.org, on that website, if you go to the top of the screen and you go to projects, you go to Lambert Park, you will see there's still a link there to take a survey. And in addition to that, if you scroll down, let's see here, maybe it's not even on here anymore. There was a way to on here to see, oh, here it is. Okay, so it's about a third of the way down the screen. You can see the results of the questions that were asked in that survey. Now, this was done, I can't remember what part in the process, but it seems it was done earlier in the process when they were doing open houses, probably around August in the summer.
Yeah, I would just say, I kind of looked at that though. I mean, if the question is, well, do you like open space? Do you like to protect open space? Well, everybody's gonna say yes. But if you say, are you, well, but are you in favor of granting that via easement to a third party forever that you may not ever be able to change? Well, then, so it depends on how you ask the question.
Okay.
Right? I mean, and to me, that survey was a little bit slanted in favor of, the Open Lands Alliance.
That's very objective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we need to get to a point of some kind of direction for tonight.
Well, there's a motion.
Are we,
that's been
yeah,
seconded.
so can you review the motion at this point for me?
Is Marla on? Can she read it?
She's not.
So Marla's out and we don't have someone.
Can you guys
Oh,
hear me?
you are.
Marla,
Okay.
do you have the
Okay,
motion that you could
so-
read back to us?
Yes, Alan added to Jeff Davis's. So Jeff said he moved to recommend tabling until further amendments and changes to the easement were done, and a draft of the management plan is presented to the Planning Commission. Alan added language for a management plan to allow for public hearing after updated documents are provided.
Okay, so basically we have a motion that says we table it until we have a management plan to review and that we have another
Public hearing
for both the management plan and the conservation easement. Anybody want to add anything to that?
Yeah, we haven't directed staff to do anything yet.
No. So, but the point of that is we've directed them to get the management plan in place, but we haven't given our recommendations for what we want to change. And my suggestion is that we submit to Austin each of our concerns and things we want changed and ask Austin to summarize those into individual points. So we're not saying the same thing. And then for him to submit them to Steve. And then that would actually give direction.
And we'll get another opportunity.
And we'll
to
get
submit
another, and
more.
then when we have our next opportunity, we can go
Right.
through
Yeah,
it line
we can go
by-
through it again,
We can go
okay.
through it again.
Yeah, because I'm really not sure that you can adequately consider the conservation easement. I mean, you can
Right.
in the macro, right, as an overall, I
Right.
like it or I don't, and I'll never like it.
Right.
Or I'll never not like it. But
Right.
but I think you have to some degree read the conservation easement in context of the management plan.
Right. So can I suggest a modification to a motion, or does it have to come from a planning commission member?
Oh, sorry, my mic's not on. So you're running the meeting.
So I can't make I can't suggest a
Right.
modification. Okay.
Okay, I'd like to direct staff to find language that would be appropriate to resolve the Grove Road improvements to be included in the easement somehow. They don't have to be detailed, but right now, my sense is that it's,
Groves included, box building.
It's our, yeah, Grove is already.
Box elder, yeah.
No, well, he's saying to improve, you're saying to improve the one access in.
right,
He's talking about the one access.
including the bridge.
Yeah, that's in the.
Okay. And then I would also ask them to remove the more specific language on the future anticipated uses.
Okay. Do you accept those modifications?
Yes.
And let them,
Okay.
and let them be more general. rather
Jeff,
than
do
be
you accept those
specific.
modifications? Okay, so those modifications were accepted by Alan and Jeff. Does anyone else have any other modifications that they want to add to it?
Jane, what was the second modification of John's? The first was the road and the bridge. And what was the second one?
And the road and the bridge were already in the wording, so we didn't need to add that modification. It was to, what was the language in that? What paragraph? was it?
To remove the specific language on future anticipated uses.
Yeah, it's
To al-
section
to-
W on page 12.
To allow us to have more flexibility in the management plan.
Yeah.
To use it as we choose, rather than having specific things.
Okay.
Because that, my feeling is that that's gonna be evidence that, well, you're specific enough on that instance, you needed to be more specific on something else you want to do in the future.
Which means it's all allowed.
Yeah.
It wasn't stated. Okay, so is that clear, Marla?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. And then, did he have anything there, the other one didn't need to be there on the road? Okay,
Yeah, that's
Okay.
in section R already.
okay. All right, any other modifications anyone wants to make? Okay, so all those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Ethan, okay, and any opposed? Okay, so the motion passes.
So there's no further action going to take place at city council until it comes back to us.
Unless they choose to, they can do, you know, but they're not going to respond to a recommendation from us, but they can do other things on it, so. Okay, so, really quickly, I'm proposing that we strike some of the items from our meeting because of time. And let's see if we can get through B, C, and D in time for city council to address those at their next meeting. So,
Strike,
yeah.
strike, E, F, and G.
thank you, thank you. And if you have, want to discuss, just go farther out by the doors, okay? Okay, so let's have the second item B introduced to us. Austin, are you going to introduce that item?
Yes, I'll go ahead and introduce this item.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay, so.
Please take discussion out in the hall, please, so that we can move on. Excuse me. Sorry to interrupt. Can you take your discussion out in the hall for us so we can move on? Thank you so much. It's okay. No, I get it. I've been there and done it many times. Just out by the front door.
Hey,
Thanks.
counselor, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Austin, are you gonna introduce?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and introduce this
Okay.
now if we feel like it's, if we're ready. Okay, so this is Three Falls subdivision plat I. So what you're seeing on the screen here is I wanted to show you what's changes occurring. So this is the plat that we're talking about, but I think you'll understand it better by the previous drawing. So what we're really talking about here is this is lot 50 in the Three Falls subdivision. And what you see here on the screen is showing some changes to the lot. So I'm gonna go ahead and just trace the existing lot lines. This is what the lot currently looks like today. Has a long tail on the end of it there. Some things to point out on this. So the lot currently has a easement that runs through it. This is a city storm drain easement. And then other important things to point out on this is there is private open space, which is all this striped area. It extends all the way down like this and continues along on the other side of the road. So that's all private open space. And then the city has open space, is all this blue area here. So that's city open space. What they're proposing to change on this is they want to reshape the lot so that it's like this, it's a more squared lot. The easement would now be on city open space. It's proposed that this green area becomes city open space, and that easement would therefore be in city open space. The private open space would be vacated inside that area on both the lot and in the city open space. And thus, the city open space would then look like this essentially. So everything on this side of the line is city open space. The drainage easement is now in city open space. And so the question is, why are they proposing to do this? There's a couple of reasons. One, they're getting a bigger buildable area on lot 50 to be able to build what they want to build on there. Does the city stand? The city actually stands to kind of gain on this. We actually gain open space, and the private open space is done away with. The reason why that was there, I'm not sure if it was for a trail or whatnot, but there are no trails around this particular lot, so we're not affecting any trails or anything. City still has its right to access the easement. As far as staff is concerned, we don't see any major concerns with this proposal from a city standpoint. We don't see how this would be. We see, if anything, it's giving us more open space and more flexibility to do with what we want to on that lower south end.
Okay. All right. Was there anything that Jed needed to add to that?
Not really. The private open space, when Three Falls originally platted the entire development, they put a strip of private open space around all of the lots to give lots somewhat of a buffer against the public open space. But as individuals have come in and bought the lots, a lot of them just haven't really even cared to worry about the private open space. And what we're seeing on all these plat amendments is the result of owners buying the lots and really analyzing the lots and just wanting to customize them a little bit for their need. And that's really what the next plat we're going to look at. It's a very similar situation to this one. We'll talk about it when we get to it, but
All
yeah.
right. So this just shapes up the lot for the home owner or lot owner and adds a little bit more public open space to the city. May not really be usable or anything, but there's nothing that stand to be lost from the city point of view. Okay.
Correct. I actually see this as a win-win because it puts, so the easement that was there was actually an access road, and it also did contain storm drain infrastructure. It's just nice to not have our infrastructures and access roads on somebody else's property, whether we have an easement or not. So it just kind of cleans things up, and it helps the lot owner out as well.
Okay, great. Okay, any questions from, a motion?
What plat is it?
This is plat I. Oh, so I should also point out, so in your packet, you're going to see two plats that are labeled plat H. Two people wanted to use the same name. So three, I guess they all wanted to be H. So we had to make them differentiate. So this one is plat I. The next one that we're going to look at is going to be plat J, even though I think it's still labeled H. Or maybe it is. Yeah, it is H. And then the other one, the last one that we're going to look at is the actual plat H. So in that order, we will look at them.
That property that you just showed is on plat I, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it might be easiest in the motion just to simply say, let's fix the red lines, because the red lines correct all of the plat numbering issues.
Yeah, we've redlined that, so.
So just go with the sample motions.
Yeah, so the sample motion would be a clear motion if you have the sample motion.
I'll make a motion that we recommend approval of Three Falls subdivision plat I with the following conditions. Prior to recording, the developer addressed the red lines on that plat and plans and receive a letter of approval from the Three Falls Architectural Review Committee for the new proposed boundaries.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by John McKay, a second by Alan McDonald. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so it passes unanimously. Let's move on to the next item.
Okay.
Have you ever seen such a boundary description as that?
So,
Pages and pages.
know.
The surveyor was there for a week.
You've written through there, it's
yeah, the
amazing.
surveyor had a really good time drawing
Yeah,
those
I know.
boundary description, or writing up those boundary
Hiking
descriptions.
through.
He did on this one too.
This one was pretty bad as well.
Okay.
So this one is similar to the other one in a lot of ways. Really what they're doing is they're creating a lot that's going to allow them to build what they want to build on it. Again, they're, as Jed explained very well, they're customizing it to the way that they want to do. You know, they're really taking a close look at this lot and saying, okay, I want to build this on this lot. How can I do that? And what's the best way to go about that? And so this lot does stand, we do stand to gain open space on this one as well. It looks like it's, you know, probably a similar situation to the last one, a win-win situation, if you will. You know, again, some of the private open space is being done away with. So here in the red, that will become city open space. The piece of the property that was down here on the south also becomes city open space. So this whole area here becomes city open space. And the new boundary is this red line. So that's what the lot looks like, if I'm not mistaken, right? Is that right, Jed?
That's correct. The only slightly confusing part is that middle green shaded area is existing public open space, which would actually be turned into a lot. But overall, the city still gains almost 20,000 square feet of public open space.
Yeah.
And one more thing, and sorry, Austin, if you were already going to mention this, the trails, you can see those light gray somewhat. Yeah. Those trails were surveyed in to where they're actually built. And if you notice, they kind of crossed over into that upper green area was existing private open space. It was not the intent of the development to put it in the private open space, but regardless, they have adjusted the lot lines. So the lot lines do not interfere with the existing trail.
Is that why that lot line takes that weird jog
Yeah, yep.
down and then across?
And
Okay.
don't we have an ordinance against lots that have that many sides?
We do, but all of Three Falls was approved prior to that ordinance going in. If you want to talk about that, I guess we can, but this particular one, 2, 3, 4, 5, had 5 to begin with. 7, 8. I think it got 9 to end, but the point of that ordinance was to eliminate flagged lots, and this clearly is not a flagged lot.
Okay, so you're saying that this lot does not actually have trails going through the back part of the lot?
Correct.
Not now.
Not now.
Yeah, that red line is their new proposed lot line, and the trails are outside it.
The trail is outside.
Yeah, what trail is this? Is this forbidden?
Yes, it is.
Oh, Jeff like runs 100 miles a day on trails. He's one of those kind of crazy people. But it's amazing, which is great to have on planning commission because he knows all the trails. Okay, I neglected something on our last item. I forgot that we need to have a public hearing. I appreciate John for correcting me on that. So we need to back up to item B and open a public hearing on that because it is a amendment to a lot. So if anyone would like to make a comment on item B. You're just leaving? You're not gonna come? Okay, fine. No. No, that's okay. Yeah, by now we've kind of all forgotten what we wanted to say, so. All right, thank you. Okay, if there's no comment on that, we'll close the public hearing on item B. And do we need to vote on that again, make our motion and vote again? Or are we okay to refer back to those motions?
I don't think it would hurt to make.
Okay, let's
to
do this. Should we just, Marla? Maybe she's
Just
not
add
there
an
anymore.
aye. Just redo it.
Well, let's just redo the motion then.
All right, John McKay making a motion to recommend approval of the Three Falls subdivision plat J with the following conditions prior to recording to the developer, address all the red lines on the plat and plans.
It's I, it's plat.
It's I, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Aye, plat I. Address the red lines on the plat and plans, receive a letter of approval from the Three Falls Architectural Review Committee for the new proposed boundaries.
We have a motion by John McKay. Do we have a second?
Second myself.
Yeah.
Okay, Alan McDonald seconds it again. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes again unanimously. Okay, so now back on this lot 46. Does anyone have questions on that before we go ahead and make a motion? Okay, let's get a motion.
Need a public hearing on this
Yes.
one as well?
We
Oh.
do.
Thanks, Marla.
Hello, Marla. I am just way too tired. Let's open the public hearing on lot 46. Would anyone like to make a comment on this lot? Okay, we'll close the public hearing and we need a motion.
I can do a motion here.
Okay,
I move to recommend approval of Three Falls subdivision plat H, correct?
J.
Make it J. With the following conditions, prior to recording, the developer address the red lines on the plat and plans and receive a letter of approval from the Three Falls Architectural Review Committee for the new proposed buildable area.
okay, we have a recommendation by Troy Slade. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Jeff Davis. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. All right, moving on to item C. No, item D.
D, okay, so I'll introduce this and we can hold a public hearing on this one as well.
You don't want to get away with that.
So this is Three Falls subdivision plat H.
Okay.
This is the one that will remain H.
Okay.
And so this lot, I thought it would actually be beneficial to show on the county map. So just so you can see kind of where it is. It's a larger lot. It's 5 acres. And so just so you can kind of get a frame of reference for it, it's surrounded on 3 sides by roads. Going back to the other image here. So he wants to amend the plat. What we're doing on this one, we're not adjusting any boundary lines. All we're doing is proposing that, and again, this is one is not coming from the city, but this is coming from the landowner. He's made this proposal. He's proposing that he be approved, I guess that be approved new buildable area in this upper northeast corner of the lot. So currently he has a buildable area approved down here and here. There are easements, or not easements, but yeah, I guess they are easements, drainage easements that run like this through the property. And so that's why his buildable area is kind of split like that. Anyways, he's proposing to build his main home kind of in this area here. And he'd like to have another structure or building on that northeast corner. So
what is the northeast corner right now? Why is that in hatch mark?
So the hatch mark is signifying the proposed building envelope. Right now, there is no building envelope there. So it's just white. There's nothing there. He's now saying, I want to build in that area. So just to back up, everything in Three Falls, it requires a buildable area. If you don't have a buildable area there, you can't build on it.
Right.
A lot of the lots actually have you can only disturb so much of the area.
Right.
So he's dealing with those restrictions. And so in this situation here, he needs approval from the city He'll also need approval from the Three Falls Architectural Review Committee. They would also have to approve this. But, you know, they can't approve it unless the city's made a decision on the matter. So he wants to build another building up there. We'll get, you know, right now it's a building. He would like it to be a guest house. If he can't get a guest house, then he would build a garage type structure there. But on our other agenda items here, we'll talk about the guest house in more detail, but for the purpose of this item on the agenda, we're just looking at should a new buildable envelope be approved on this lot in that north.
Does the request violate any code or ordinance?
It does not.
So no exceptions, variances?
He's not, for this, for the purpose of this, he
area.
does not need any exception for this. He just needs it approved.
What standards do we have for a buildable area to be called a buildable area?
It's gotta have
So
some
Austin-
right slope. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, Austin can probably pull the ordinance up, but the buildable area is kind of standard. It requires 5,000 square foot minimum area. The slope has to be less than 20%, although in the CE5 zone, it's 25%. Obviously, there can't be any kind of hazards like floodplains or drainage easements or anything like that in it. And yeah, I said Austin can pull up the ordinance because there is a couple. Oh, it's got to be accessible from a public right of way. I'm just going off memory here, but the applicant did do an extensive geotechnical study to find exactly where the fault line was. Originally, the fault line was actually shown more south than it is on this plat, which is why there was no buildable area there in the first place. But they did go do a geotechnical study and found that the fault line is further north. And because the fault line's out of the way, now they are requesting that this area be approved as a buildable area since it meets all the other criteria.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Oh, we need to have a public hearing. Thank you. Let's open the public hearing on this. Yay, public comment.
Yes. Hi, I'm Scott Jones. I'm the property owner in question. I know, and I was mainly here to answer questions that may come up regarding agenda item E. But the discussion tonight was fascinating, and I'm familiar with conservation easements. I've had to create one myself, and good luck with that one. Anyway, I just want to say I'm in favor of this. We've done a slope study. We've done the geotech study. We've got the letter of approval from the TRC and the HOA, and hoping to get this looked at in conjunction with the next agenda item as well.
Okay, any other comment on this? Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Do you have any questions for the planning commission members? Any items that you want to discuss on this? Okay, do you have a motion?
I'll move to recommend approval of the Three Falls subdivision plat H with the following conditions. Prior to recording, the developer address all the red lines on the plat and plans and receive a letter of approval from the Three Falls Architectural Review Committee. Boundaries.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion by John McKay. We have a second by Troy Slade. Any discussion on the motion?
Is it a boundary or a buildable area?
Oh, yeah, good point.
Because I don't, the other two lots had boundary changes.
Yeah.
Boundary
Let's
changes to
modify
buildable
that. It's
area.
probably written.
Yeah.
Okay, we need a modification on the motion to say, replace the word boundary with buildable area? Or do you want to restate it?
I don't say, we're just approving. I think it's fine the way I read it.
Okay.
Recommend approval of the Three Falls subdivision plat H, which they're modifying it with the buildable area.
Okay.
Right?
Okay, will you read back the motion to us, Marla, if you're on still?
Okay, John McKay moved to approve the Three Falls plat. Could you hear me?
Yes, there's just an echo.
With the addition of, I'm not sure what he said about the buildable area.
Oh, okay.
I didn't.
Is it as stated in the?
Yeah.
Okay, it's just as stated in the sample motion then.
I think you could just say, I motion to approve
The
plat H as proposed.
Yeah,
Okay, okay, perfect, thank you.
Okay,
that's the motion.
all right, thanks. So we've got the motion. We have it seconded by Troy Slade. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so that passes, which brings us to the next item, and then we will table the other items. But since he waited 3 hours for us, we should see both of his items for him. And this one will
Okay.
have more discussion, most likely.
All right. Yeah, so as I mentioned before, that buildable area, he wants to use it for a guest house. So really what we're looking at tonight, and these are slides that he prepared, so I'm just gonna kind of show, and maybe he can come up and add some more if he would like. So he's really wanting to accomplish 3 things. He wants to update the plat, which you just motioned, recommended to approve. The second thing he wants to do is request that a city ordinance be amended to allow for an exception with regards to guest houses. And then finally, the third thing that he's seeking is that his guest house can be approved. So just so you can be aware, so guest houses are something that has to be approved by the city council after following a recommendation by the planning commission, as our ordinance is currently written. However, the current ordinance does not have any exception clauses in there. So what that means is to get a guest house approved, it has to meet the ordinance exactly the way it's written. You have to be on a shared driveway. You have to be on greater than 5 acres. And then there's other criteria. So in this situation, he meets all of those criteria except for one, which is he's unable, because of those drainage easements that we just showed, he's unable to get a shared driveway that would go to this guest house. So the guest house would be on the northeast corner of the property. Let me go back to the plat again. So the northeast corner here, the proposed access point would be, somewhere around here-ish. That I think that remains to be completely determined at this point. But the idea is that he would have a driveway access somewhere, for a separate driveway access for that guest house to the north. However, our ordinance doesn't currently allow that. So what he's proposing is that we amend the ordinance to allow for exceptions. And I'll just basically, here's the language that he's proposing. So the ordinance reads, the guest house shall be an integral part of the site plan for the principal dwelling and attendant lot area. Vehicular access to the guest house shall be over the same driveway as the primary dwelling. And then the language that he's proposing to add is, or as recommended by the planning commission and approved by the city council. So he's proposing this ordinance change tonight, which would grant him the ability to get a guest house on that northeast corner of the property. I don't know if there's anything else I need to add to that. And again, he's here if you have any questions, so.
Okay. So do you have anything you want to add to that before we discuss?
Austin covered it
Okay.
really well. Yeah.
Okay, great. So let's go ahead and hold the public hearing portion of this item, and then we can discuss it. So we'll open the public hearing. If anyone would like to make a comment about this proposed change, they can now. Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing then. And the planning commission can take a look at this. As Austin mentioned, this is something that one of the citizens is requesting. And it will go before the city council. We'll be making a recommendation. Whether we think it should be changed or not, the city council will then make the final decision of whether they think it should be changed or not. So.
So is this actually a public road, or is this, it says on the map here, emergency access road? Is that what that is?
Can you go back to the map?
Yeah, let's go back to, maybe I'll just pull up the county map. So this is, if we click on, they call this an emergency access road. I mean, really, it is narrower than the other streets, and Jed can comment on the split, you know, how wide it is. But I know it is narrower.
It is emergency access road. Is our street master plan calls out a couple different classifications for streets. You got your residential, collector and arterial, as well as secondary access. And secondary access is a more narrow width. It's 26 feet in width and has a more narrow right of way. And this is a secondary access road.
So normally, yes, it's paid, but normally you would not have a drive, the subdivision access points are supposed to be, are they supposed to be off of the regular roads? Are there any restrictions to actually building and having the access point come off of that road?
I think the way the ordinance reads is your buildable area has to have access and frontage on the nearest public right of way. And a secondary access road, though narrow, is a public right of way.
Okay.
Okay, that was my question.
So the basic purpose of the way it's written now was to basically prevent two homes from being built on the same lot.
Yeah, I mean, the way it's written is ideally you'd have a guest house. Most lots would be narrower than this, and ideally you'd want the guest house located behind the main house. And so the idea when they drafted it was they'd have a long straight driveway that goes to the house, and then behind that house would be a guest house. So obviously this is a uniquely shaped lot, unique situation. And so that's why he feels like there should be an exception clause for unique situations.
Did we, I guess we changed that. It seemed like, I guess I'm thinking of the above the garage apartments, they had to be attached to the house.
Yeah, that's a good
ordinance.
question. So
Yeah.
guest houses and accessory dwelling units or accessory apartments are two different things. So a guest house, the way that Alpine City defines a guest house is it's its own building. It's separate from the main building. It's its own building, but it's used for another residence on the property. An accessory apartment has to be inside the main home. It can either, you know, typically you'll see them above a garage or in a basement. Those are probably the two most common places. Or it can be on the main floor of a main home, but it's limited to 25% of the square footage.
And you have to have 5 acres, right? to have
So for a guest house, you
But
have
for a
to have
guest
five.
house, you have to have 5 acres. For an accessory dwelling unit, you don't.
Right.
So almost anybody in the city could, in theory, qualify to have an accessory apartment on their property.
If they have five. Okay, oh, yes,
They can
yes,
put it
accessory
in their
apartment,
home-
but
in
a
their
guest
home.
house,
So
they have to have.
anybody that has a basement, they can,
Yes.
in theory, convert it
Right.
into, as long as they have
right.
like off-street parking.
Right.
So this is a very unique thing. It's really like having a second home on the property.
Yeah, it is.
In a sense. It is called a guest house because it's gonna be smaller than the main home, but it is, for all intents and purposes, a second residence on the property.
Would it be easier rather than changing an ordinance, just to divide that lot into 2 lots?
Yeah.
So I know that he's looked at that. I mean, I know he's been looking at this for a year or more. And so there's lots of different obstacles that come with dividing it. One of them is he's building inside the Three Falls subdivision. So Three Falls
Has their rules. Yeah.
has their rules and regulations that are in many ways more restrictive than the cities. And one of their regulations is you cannot subdivide a lot. And so his hands are tied in that regard.
And also in conjunction with that, Three Falls was only allowed so many lots when they became a PRD. So I think between that and the Three Falls CCNRs, I don't think that's allowed.
Could a variance, rather than modifying an ordinance, is this something that could just be taken up in a variance?
That was my question, because to me, we changed the ordinance to say, except if it's approved by the planning commission, then everybody's gonna say, hey, well, you did it for that person, you did it for that person.
Right,
Why is mine different?
Yeah.
You know, you liked him more than me. So, yeah.
Is there
it-
any way that this could go through another process without modifying an ordinance?
A variance is a possibility. So there's
And isn't that what a variance is for?
variances are for outstanding circumstances that are irregular.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we do variances, a fair amount.
Right.
Yeah.
Just one thing to add is, under our current ordinance, I'm currently unaware of a guest house, a legal guest house that's been approved that meets all of the criteria in our ordinance. So every time someone comes to me and they say, I want to build a guest house, and I say, well, you have to meet A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Nobody
also, I mean,
can meet all of those
yeah, how
requirements. It's
many-
never,
So
I've never
how
seen
they
it happen.
happen
5
without
acre-
changing all the ordinances every time?
So it's a difficult ordinance to meet. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
So I mean, just can you, I mean, it's what Jeff's bringing up, for example, is just kind of like the law of unintended consequences, right? I mean,
Mhm.
do you know, you don't want to be so like, well, we modified an ordinance just to accommodate
One person.
a particular
Yeah.
homeowner is what you don't, is what you become a little
Oh.
susceptible to.
Yeah,
We-
I
The
agree.
flip side of that is, we also have we understand we're all homeowners in the city. We like
Yeah.
to accommodate, within reason. So, I mean, I guess a question to you and Jed, who deal with lots of these permitting and other requests day in, day out. Do you guys see any issues here with just opening up can of worms, the law of unintended consequences, or something along those lines? Austin or Jed?
I mean, in my opinion, because he's focusing in on the vehicular access aspect of it and not necessarily saying it's an exception to everything about the guest house ordinance. In that way, I feel like it has a narrower focus, so I wouldn't be as opposed. If he just had if he was just suggesting, hey, here's our guest house ordinance and item, whatever it comes next is you can get an exception to all of the above. I would have a problem with that. I would not be okay with approving something like that.
Makes sense.
But what
Next person.
would the variance process be, rather than amending an ordinance to accommodate this requested use?
Yeah, so he could take this through the variance process. The process for that is he'd have to schedule a hearing with our appeals officer. And we'd schedule a date and time for that. It would be a public hearing. So anybody that was opposed to that could come to that meeting, voice their concerns about it. But most of those decisions are looked at on a case-by-case basis. They would look at, does it meet our ordinance? Does this conflict with our current ordinance? And if not, is there a precedence for this being granted somewhere else? They'd look for some kind of legal precedence. And so from what I've seen in the past is they'll usually find some kind of case out there that's kind of rendered a decision on this. And then that would usually depend on whether the variance would be granted or not.
Within the city or outside?
Outside the city, yeah, typically they're finding examples at, just the nearest example that they can find.
You
So-
say that all the guest houses have had to go through this for one reason or another. Do they go to the variance? Is
So
that how they're
what I'm
doing
saying
it?
is I've never had anybody come to me that wants to build a guest house, get a guest house approved. I've never seen one approved in my time with the
But
city,
because they don't typically.
because they
for
can't
most
meet all the
part,
criteria.
They're not gonna ever be able to, for example, I have to have a 5 acre lot. I mean, how
Yeah,
many 5 acre lots are there? There's
that's
very
usually
few.
the one that stops them in
Right.
their tracks. I say
So-
you have to have 5 acres and it doesn't go any further than that usually.
Yeah, I mean, but that's easy. That's why I was just asking is how are you handling these other situations? But if it's just
Yeah.
5 acre, then that
Yeah.
makes no
I mean, I
difference.
feel like in his case, it makes sense. I don't see why, any reason why he couldn't have that.
I agree. I just.
But yeah, I agree with
Just
changing the. I don't know.
So you'd rather see it go through a variance process and a hearing with the city rather than modify an ordinance to
Yeah.
accommodate a single homeowner request?
I think
That's
so.
what I think a variance process is for.
Yeah.
rather than us modifying ordinances. And I understand, go ahead and come on up to the microphone. You're welcome to say, I understand that, you know, we've had a lot of that this year where we had homeowners requesting we modify ordinances. This is. We've had
There's been
multiple.
a lot of success with variances that I know that people have went and.
Right. Then that's the purpose,
So-
but go ahead.
Yeah, so I could be wrong and I don't want special treatment. I know that if my house was on a corner lot, I could have 2 driveways.
Mhm.
If I took the bathroom out of this guest house, I could have a second driveway
Right.
that doesn't use the same thing, because then it would be an accessory building and not a guest house.
Mhm.
And I was told early on in the process that the variance would look at it and say, well, it doesn't meet this ordinance and would likely not pass. So that's why we're here
Okay.
talking about the ordinance.
You know, I've heard that a lot about people saying, well, if they go for a variance, it's not gonna pass. I guess I want to know more about the variance process, because to me, that's what it's there for, is to use common sense and apply to a case like yours. But
I think the point of a variance is there's a sense of uncertainty about it. Whereas with an ordinance, if you meet the ordinance, you have to approve it.
Mhm.
I mean, that's the way it
Well,
is kind
so
of,
let
so.
me just ask you, was it Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
If Mr. Johnson were to go through the variance process and be denied, he could come back and say, look, it didn't work out. Could I,
Yeah, what's his recourse? I guess.
you know,
that's
I
what
mean,
you're saying.
because then he could, this could still be an option, right?
Correct,
it
yep.
could. Or if the city council could approve this. You know, if we feel like, we don't think we should modify an ordinance for this, it's still gonna go to city council unless they pull it from the agenda. And if they think,
that's
yeah, we
true.
should do that, they could.
But the
So-
the
Right,
chances
you're
are
just
less,
making a
I'm sure.
recommendation tonight. But yeah, I mean, staff, we don't really
Yeah.
feel strongly one way or the other. So, you know, this is, again, this request is coming from the landowner here, the.
Yeah.
How long
that's
does
here
a
tonight,
variance
Scott
process
Johnson.
usually take? Yeah.
A variance process usually takes, it's about a 2-month process by the time you
Mhm.
request the hearing, hearing's scheduled, and then the hearing officer renders a decision. Usually, they usually don't make the decision in the hearing itself. They'll hold the hearing and then they will respond usually within a few weeks after the hearing date.
And the public comment is in the. open-
very, I don't know.
It's a public meeting, so we would hold it here at City Hall and it would be recorded, it would be
And typically you give notice to adjoining
Noticed.
property owners who could perhaps object to the requested variance if they wanted to show up and do so.
Well, they've already got notice for this meeting, right?
Yeah, I mean, they
Well,
were
and
noticed. for
I
this.
have written approval of my guest house plan
Yeah,
from all of my neighbors.
Great.
I think it's just some hesitation to be seen
Yeah.
as amending an ordinance to accommodate a single
Mhm.
Right. I mean,
resident's request.
And then there's
I would
probably
recommend
that
you
pressure
don't, I mean,
for everybody
unless you
else.
feel like this is something that would benefit, you know, that needs to be changed for the
Mhm.
good of the city as a whole, for the good of, you know, all the other 5-acre lot owners that want a guest house. Is this something that's a benefit? If you feel like it's
Well,
just a
your point,
one,
though, but your point is just kind of a unicorn request, so we're essentially being
Yes.
asked to amend
Yeah.
an ordinance for a unicorn request.
Yes.
There's one.
Yeah, well, and one problem we have with it is where it says, or as recommended by the planning commission, but we don't have any definition as to when we would recommend it and when we wouldn't.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So it's just
totally
kind of
arbitrary.
ambiguous or arbitrary when we would choose to recommend it or when we wouldn't, so.
Yeah, that was kind of my
Yeah.
thinking, Jane, is then it becomes, oh, well, you did it for that person.
Yeah,
On what basis did you do? Well, we
Kind of
thought it
whatever
was
mood
okay.
we're in.
yeah. I mean, I feel really
Yeah.
bad saying this, but I do think the variance process is the right place for this. But
And look, it's-
I do feel bad because
Well, because it makes.
I mean,
sense
because
what
it does
he's
make
doing.
sense for
Yeah.
him to put his guest house there, like he said, like you can put a barn there, you can put you know, some of those things, but no one would be actually living in it permanently or semi-permanently and in those cases, and that's why it's allowed.
John, what do you think?
But I don't know.
Scott?
I don't like the idea of modifying our ordinance, especially with squishy language like this. If there's an avenue, I think it's a reasonable request. I think it's.
I do
It's
too.
a reasonable ask.
Yeah.
If it can be accommodated through a variance process, that's what I would favor.
If you want to come up and say something, there are two of you here. You are welcome to. Would you, though, do please state your name and
Yeah,
address?
Brant Bishop. I live on Box Elder Way currently, but I also own land in
Free Falls.
If it were me, what I would be concerned about is the variance statute poses a separate layer of requirements that are more onerous, or could be interpreted to be more onerous.
Okay.
One of which is that granting the variance is essential to the enjoyment of a substantial property right possessed.
Yeah, I remember that when we talked about that with, remember the house that needed to extend their porch a foot? And that was the same thing. So that is a challenge.
Well, what is that language for the what?
If we could pull up that proposed language again, maybe one other idea that isn't arbitrary is we could just change and insert one word. Since you don't get many applications that meet the criteria, and this just deals with the driveway, we could say vehicular access to the guest house shall optionally be over the same driveway. I don't know if that messes anything up with the city. I understand the
Or
intent
you'd
of
have to
it.
just, yeah, I think you'd have to take that out entirely because, you know, the question would be is, what is the purpose of vehicular access to the guest house over the same driveway? Like, what is the purpose of that sentence?
To limit the number of points of egress or access to the street.
So, and I think it was mostly due to the fact that we didn't want two driveways on a long skinny lot. And this is not a long skinny lot.
Yeah, that's kind of what he was saying is, you know.
Right,
And it
so.
touches 3 streets, we could limit
Yeah,
it
really.
to 1 drive per street.
That's true. Well, if there was a corner lot, would it be allowed?
Yes.
If there was a corner lot, why would that be allowed?
Not for a guest house.
Not for a
Or
guest
not for
house.
guest house.
Okay. So, yeah, so it doesn't.
The way the ordinance is currently written, it has to be, the guest house has to be on the same driveway as the main home.
But if they put any other kind of outbuilding, they can have another driveway to any other kind of outbuilding, not a guest house.
Correct. So to his point, he was saying, if I build a garage.
Right.
And I store all my cars in there, whatever, I can have another driveway there.
Right. That doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
He could build the same building, the same size, with the same driveway, just he takes out a bathroom and all of a sudden. He
Right.
can do exactly what he
Right.
wants to do.
So to me, I mean, we still need to think of what Alan is saying, the law of unintended consequences, but
I don't know that there are any. I mean,
would you
it's
just
it's
remove?
Sort of the optics of the grant. I mean, Austin, does that, I mean, because like, on the other hand, I mean, I hate to, I hate to make a guy with a reasonable request jump through a bunch of bureaucratic hoops when we could, solve a kind of a one-off question that in your tenure may probably never come up again, Austin, other than, it was, actually originated the concern with Jeff. I just agreed with it that, does that, would you in your practice and your professional day-to-day, Austin, have, the concern that Jeff and I expressed come back to thrown in your face?
Well, I'm always concerned about changes to the ordinance and, making it, making a change just for one person is not a reason to change an ordinance. So we've seen other ordinance changes in the past couple of years, and many of you have been on the planning commission, may have seen some of those. And I felt like, maybe some of those other situations didn't warrant ordinance change.
We're more wary now because of
And
those.
because of that, it sets, as you mentioned, it may set a precedence that, hey, you did that for this guy, why don't you just change it for me too.
I have a suggestion.
Well, it's not necessarily changed for him. I mean, it's just an easier avenue, right?
Mhm.
Because
Right.
it then comes just directly to
Mhm.
us as a recommendation, which
Mhm.
still has to be approved by the city council.
One thing we could consider with this, when I bought the lot, I reviewed the CCNRs for the development, which were
Mhm.
approved by the city,
Mhm.
and specifically enumerated in the CCNRs. It says lots over 5 acres are allowed a guest house and a second driveway. And the city approved that,
Hmm.
but it's in
point.
conflict with the city ordinance.
What about this? What if we change this ordinance to say that vehicular access to the guest house shall be over the same driveway or off of an adjacent, not the same street, is what I'm trying to say.
Separate street.
A separate street, because
I mean, yeah. So
that's
just
the.
one point of clarification,
Mhm.
CCNRs are their own document. The city has nothing to do with that process. Those are not city documents.
We didn't
Okay.
see that. I
I just want to
The city
clarify
didn't
that.
approve them? No.
The city
No.
doesn't
Oh,
approve
okay.
CCNR. Okay,
My
well,
bad.
that's a good point, though.
But
I think what Jane's saying though is correct, that we should consider just saying, give us the same rights as you would for a barn for our second home.
I mean, there may
Or
be a
guest
better way
home.
to write this. So this
Right.
language is what Mr. Johnson's proposed,
Mhm.
but maybe someone
Shall
here
be
sees a
over the
better way to
same
write it.
driveway unless a second point of access is available on a different street.
Yeah, something like that.
And it-
Um,
Because then we're making it accessible to everyone.
right,
it's not
it's
And we're-
defined, it's not arbitrary.
It's the same
Right.
rules as a corner lot.
Right, the same rules as a corner lot, is what I'm saying, but it also is defined where we're not arbitrarily applying this.
Yeah, and that's what I was hesitant
Mhm.
about.
Yeah, I could live with that.
Do you think you could live with that?
I could go with that.
Yeah, because I don't see
Because
anything getting too wild and crazy with that.
No, I
the
don't
chance
either.
of that happening is probably minuscule.
Right.
Right, well, and if it is,
right,
it's a
exactly.
5 acre lot. They've got the two driveway, and then if someone else did need access from the same street, to me, then you do have two access points rather close together. That feels more like a problem than a separate.
Crafted, Alan.
What?
Crafted.
I know,
Yeah.
what was, so
Get that
no, someone had
pencil
good
going.
language, so
Yeah, you did.
over the
John.
same driveway
It was,
as for the primary dwelling,
Yeah,
comma,
you said it.
or,
Unless
oh,
a second driveway can be accessed from a different street. From the primary driveway.
a second driveway can be accessed from.
From a different
Driveway is on
street.
Another street, correct?
What would be the language, Austin, that would work for you? Is that kind of a term of art?
Is that-
Another street or?
is that
I
other
don't
street
know,
is
yeah,
that
and
a
we
different
could,
name?
we
Not
could
gonna
say
happen.
in this.
Or a legal
That's a
search,
good-
because
yeah,
that was,
So-
that was the emergency access.
Right.
So
back
you
then.
could come off of Hidden Springs Circle.
Yeah, I could also come up with that, even if the emergency access road were problematic. Okay.
Because to me, like I said, this kind of is a corner lot type of situation that it would make
In many
sense
ways, it
on.
is kind of like a.
It
corner
is.
lot.
Kind of a corner.
Yeah,
So it would
and
be
that's
an-
where it makes more
so-
sense
so
for
it'd be
someone to
from
have.
another existing street, another legal street, or just another street? What's
What's
right
the,
language?
what's the right language for that, do you think? Jed, what were you saying that, the 26-foot street is still considered a public street, public right of way?
Yeah, it's still a public right of way, just like any of our other streets are.
Okay.
So
We were just
There's-
trying to remember what the term was used. What do you think of that, Jed? What, do you think that has any unintended consequences or causes problems for engineering? Do you think that sounds very reasonable, or do you think we're just getting too creative? What we're talking about.
maybe you should restate what you're come up with, because my
Okay.
brain's
So this would be the language.
I
right, for
agree.
F. First sentence the same, second sentence says, vehicular access to the guest house shall be over the same driveway as for the primary dwelling, comma, unless a second driveway can be accessed from another public right of way.
I don't think that's bad language.
It's not
What if-
much of an endorsement, Jed.
What if you guys
So-
freshen, what if you guys take the concept and make the language
Well,
professional?
Well, because we need to. you know,
But I mean,
send out
we can do it and as part of the motion, say with any language adjustments as needed
Or
before
just
they
say
bring it
something
to.
with the following proposed language, or as
Modified by
you know,
staff.
As modified
staff.
by staff, right? Because then it's got to go to city council anyway.
Okay, so I'm ready to make a motion.
I think we're all too tired to think of intelligent thoughts right now, but
Okay.
we've got the general
I'll just
idea.
make the motion,
Okay.
see if people want to join it.
Okay,
I'll make a motion that we recommend that the city council consider amending ordinance. You go up the page.
It's 21,
21-20.
2021-20.
Okay, ordinance 2021-20. I'll go back down.
now scroll back down.
Subsection F.
Keep going.
Hold on a second. Or 2F. Oh, boy.
That's all right. We already have a headache. It's not causing any more damage.
Item F.
To read, particularly the second sentence, vehicular access to the guest house shall be over the same driveway as for the primary dwelling, comma, unless a secondary driveway can be accessed from another public right of way. Language subject to modification by staff.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Alan McDonald, a second by John McKay. Okay, any comment on that motion? Questions?
Does that force them to build a second driveway? Or am I
No,
reading that?
they can come on the existing driveway or
Okay, gives them the option. Okay,
gives them
that's
the option. So it says, or a second, yes. If
Yeah.
if it can be accessed by another public right of way.
Basically, it gives them two options. You have
Yeah.
option one, shared driveway, option two, off a separate road.
And so basically for a corner lot or a lot that is surrounded in his case by 3 different streets, they could build their barn, the guest house, the same as a barn off of another driveway. Okay,
perfect. Yep.
awesome. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, great. All right.
Wow, thank you so much.
Hey.
Wow, you got it done.
I'm surprised we had enough brain power to do that, but I like that. I feel good about where that ended up. So thanks for coming and waiting so long.
I'll be back again. I've got one more as soon as FEMA issues some permits.
Okay.
Not another
Oh,
one.
no, you don't want us to
FEMA.
modify more ordinances, I hope.
No, it'll be
Okay.
easy.
Okay. All right.
Famous last words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Thank you,
we
sir.
are off to communications, is that right? I think I threw my paper away. I
Yes,
suck at it.
communication. So we decided to table items F and G
Yes.
to the next meeting, and the next item on the agenda is communications.
Okay, does anyone have communications?
When is the
What-
next meeting?
Good question. The next meeting
So-
is in,
Our next meeting is, we have it on the calendar as December 7th.
okay,
So that would be the next meeting date, and these items would just roll over to that meeting.
So I actually have a very brief public communication, and that would be that I believe that the Trail Committee is going to need to revisit equestrian access on the Alpine City Trails and Draper
okay,
Trails. Because in spite of signs, public service announcements, I mean, Jeff, I do a ton of mountain biking up there, and Jeff can second his trail running. I mean, taking a 1,200-pound animal with a 200-pound human on it, and
Mhm.
they
Tearing it up.
and they tear it up after any kind of rain. It's almost like the chosen time to go is during a rain or right afterwards, and
okay,
it tears up the trails, it erodes them, they do so much damage to the trails.
okay.
And if, you know, for users that are probably less than 5% of the use, by less than 2% of the use,
Mhm.
doing 95% of the damage.
Okay,
And if there can't be some type of public education within that community, then, we need to get
if there's even continued access on certain trails.
Okay, so based off of that input, should we have Austin talk to the trail committee and bring up or should we have a discussion on that and have the trail committee members come so that we can ask them? Or do you want to just give that feedback to the trail committee?
Will, are you still on? I know that Will was he was watching the meeting earlier.
Saw him a minute
Yeah,
ago,
I know
but
Bruce is aware of it, obviously, he's up
Yeah.
there riding all the time
Okay.
too.
so,
I'm happy to bring it up.
okay, will you
to
bring it up
them
and find out where we need to go
and
with that to bring it up for a discussion?
It would be, up to them to move it forward, but yeah,
Okay.
I'll bring that issue to their attention.
Great. Any other communications?
No, I don't have anything.
Okay, how about?
Sorry about that.
The only
No,
other,
that's
well, I
good.
had one thing,
Yeah.
so we do have our, Bonnie's prepared our schedule for 2022.
Okay,
And so expect that to be on the next agenda.
okay,
We try to remove things that conflict with like spring break or fall
Mhm.
break or election day, those kind of things.
Alpine
So,
days sometimes.
We'll bring it here at the next meeting so you guys can all look
Mhm.
at that and approve the schedule for the upcoming year.
Great. Is the city doing anything for Christmas this year? I know they didn't last year because of COVID. I'm just curious, haven't heard anything.
I believe there is something going on.
They are.
Is it for everybody, Jed? I'm not
I'm
sure
fine
what
if
the
it's not. I
details
just
are.
want to get stuff on my calendar because,
Like what?
well, they've in the past had like a Christmas dinner or something
I
like that.
think they are,
for-
yeah. So I'm 95% sure that they are doing it. It's a
Just
Christmas
staff
dinner
only.
on December 14th. I think it's for,
I think it's for everyone and it's gonna
For
be
everyone.
on the city council night. Yeah, so the second Tuesday. And
It's a-
invitations are being made right now, so.
Oh,
yeah.
okay,
So traditionally it's been the planning commission, city council and staff.
okay. I just want a
And
calendar.
and COVID threw us off. We didn't do anything that year. So
Sure. do
I
it
think
when
we're
I
trying to
have-
get back to
Schedule
normal.
it around all the neighborhood parties.
It's on purpose.
Yeah, so go ahead and schedule that, Jane, for that second Tuesday.
You, Come on.
It's my birthday.
Shh,
You don't
we'll
want to
have a
come with
whole
us?
party for you.
Yeah.
I'll be in Nashville that weekend.
Oh, party pooper. All right, any other communications? Okay, we need to approve the minutes.
Last meeting.
And we are approving two different minutes tonight, September
Yeah, I
21st
couldn't type them up.
and October 5th.
Can you see my nervous doodling? It is right here.
You're nervous doodling.
Okay,
My paper has
motion
doodling
to
all over it.
approve the planning commission minutes from the meeting held September 21st of 2021, as well as the meeting held October 5th of 2021.
We have a motion by Alan McDonald. Do we
I'll
have a
second
second? Second by Jeff Davis. Does anyone have any modifications they needed to make to the minutes? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, and now we need a motion if anyone would like to go home.
Motion down.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to
Second.
adjourn and a
Second it.
second by John, a motion by John, second by Troy Slade. All in